Chapter 350. Su Ming's answer caused the boy's originally bloodless face to instantly regain a healthy shade of red. Soon after, he let out a furious roar. That roar was piercing to the ears. It was a sign that his fear had reached its peak. In the distance, Wu Duo sucked in a sharp breath and looked at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. He ignored the boy's struggles and screams as he continued stuffing herbs into the boy's wounds. As time passed by, Su Ming's speed increased. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, he placed the final herb into the wound and struck the boy's body with his right hand through the air. Immediately, strange bumps squirming about on the boy's abdomen appeared. "I won't let you go. Even if I die, I'll turn into a vengeful spirit in the world and take your life." The boy's face was contorted and filled with endless hatred. He glared at Su Ming and screamed shrilly. "You won't turn into a vengeful spirit, because once I succeed in creating the medicine, even if your soul is still around, it will still exist in my medicine." As Su Ming spoke coldly, he lifted his right hand and pointed toward the sky. Immediately, lightning arcs swimming about appeared on his palm. At that moment, as all sorts of plants grew in the boy's body, a large amount of aura of death spread out from his body and filled the area. However, this aura of death was far from enough to summon lightning. Before this, Su Ming needed aura of death to gather together to create spirit plunder. Even some time ago, he still needed the aura of death from his second senior brother to help him. However, after the creation of spirit plunder, Su Ming's origin lightning had improved slightly, and he had mastered a skill that allowed him to summon lightning without the aura of death. Once he covered himself with earth and lightning and gathered a large amount of it together, it would naturally cause the lightning from the sky to come to him in an invisible manner. The instant they touched each other, it would look as if lightning was descending. Just as Su Ming was about to summon lightning, Wu Duo hesitated for a moment before he asked, If the refinement fails?" "If it fails." Su Ming lifted his left hand and pressed it on the boy's head, who was staring at him ferociously. The boy let out a piercing screech, but his trembling body could not hide the indescribable fear in his heart. At the instant Su Ming pressed his palm against the boy, with his body as the center, the earth and lightning that was everywhere on the ground surged towards him from all directions in a manner that could not be seen with the naked eye. Even if he's a soul catcher from the shaman tribe, it's impossible for him to turn into a malicious spirit, because the moment he fails, his soul will also disappear. Everything about him will be wiped off, and it would be better for him to be turned into medicine. The instant Su Ming's voice reverberated in the air, a deafening boom suddenly came from the sky. The clear sky was instantly filled with dark clouds. Bolts of lightning turned into dragons of light among the clouds. At the same time, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky with a bang and charged towards Su Ming. More accurately speaking, it was charging towards the boy beside him. A loud bang rang in the air. That sound seemed to have landed on Wu Duo's heart, causing him to feel his skin crawl. He saw with his own eyes that once the boy was struck by the bolt of lightning, his body started trembling furiously. His face instantly became dispirited, and his screams became hoarse. There was no longer any viciousness in his eyes, only fear that surged into the sky. There was even a faint pleading look in his eyes. Wu Duo instinctively gulped. His gaze fell on Su Ming, and when he saw the calm look on Su Ming's face, a chill rose in his heart. This person is ruthless and decisive. His power is extraordinary, and his enchanted treasures are mysterious. His arts are also unheard of. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I absolutely cannot provoke this sort of person. Even if it's absolutely necessary, I still have to use all my strength to avoid him. I can't face him head-on. Wu Duo's mentality had changed a few times as he saw all sorts of things about Su Ming on the way here. Only at that moment was his mentality completely set in stone. Booming sounds continued reverberating in the air. The lightning in the sky seemed to have been attracted by the ground and descended with a loud whistle, charging straight towards the boy beside Su Ming. The booming sounds continued for an hour, and the descending lightning became stronger. Eventually, each bolt of lightning was as thick as a water bucket, and when they fell, it was as if the heavens were punishing them in anger. When another bolt of lightning came crashing down, Wu Duo was even more shocked. Without a hint of hesitation, he immediately retreated several thousands of feet because the lightning that descended this time was purple. The purple bolt of lightning contained a presence that could destroy the sky and earth, and it charged towards the boy. Su Ming still had his head lifted as he looked at the sky. At that moment, he frowned and sighed. He knew that he might not be able to succeed in creating the medicine this time. Using this method to create spirit plunder was much more difficult. As Su Ming sighed, the purple bolt of lightning closed in on the boy. The boy shuddered, and with the chest that was struck by the bolt of lightning as the center, his body started shattering. The area below his chest instantly turned into ashes, and the area above his chest started shattering inch by inch. Just as the shattering spread to his neck, Su Ming shook his head and grabbed the boy's remaining head with his left hand. The origin lightning in his body surged into the boy's head through his left hand and crashed into the lightning that was spreading towards him, turning into crackling sounds that reverberated in the air. After a moment, when the dark clouds in the sky disappeared, Su Ming stood in midair with a human head in his left hand. That head belonged to the boy, and the neck area was char-black. At the same time, there was also a bag made of straw in Su Ming's hand. This was the boy's personal belongings, and Su Ming had taken it out beforehand to prevent it from being destroyed. He did not open the bag made of straw. Instead, he placed it in his bosom, then turned around and threw the head to the fire ape by his side. Su Ming looked at Wu Duo. "It's a pity that I failed." Wu Duo smiled wryly and cast a glance at the thing in Su Ming's bosom. He wanted to say something, but in the end he did not. At that moment, he was feeling slightly conflicted and hesitant. When he cast the shaman tribe's divine ability just now, he had thought that Su Ming would definitely die. That was why he risked exposing his identity and cast the shaman tribe's art to dissolve the candle dragon's power. He did not know whether Su Ming had noticed this. Besides, Su Ming's ruthlessness and his unfathomable combat abilities had also made Wu Duo rather wary. The fire ape toyed with the boy's head by his side and tied it to its waist. It might have looked a little dispirited just now, but did not forget to go to the torn corpse of the man who had fought against Su Ming just now. It found half of his head and hung it on its waist as well. When it turned around, the 5 heads turned around, and it looked a little terrifying. Su Ming put away spirit plunder, and green light shone at the center of his brows. The small sword returned to him, and he asked Wu Duo calmly, "Brother Wu, where is the next batch of shamans?" Wu Duo fell silent for a moment. He had always been a man of ambition, and at that moment, a resolute look appeared on his face. He no longer tried to hide anything and pointed into the distance. "There are still shamans about 2,000 leagues away from here. Based on my information, there are 2 of them, but accidents might happen." "Then let's go, shall we?" Su Ming smiled faintly. Wu Duo nodded his head and wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming before charging forward. Su Ming followed behind him, as usual. As for the fire ape, it continued carrying the battle axe and followed behind them. However, when it was blocking the charge from the human-faced snake, most of the blade had melted away. Now, the damage was all over the place. Only the pole-shaped handle remained intact. No one knew what it was made of, but it was completely undamaged. The fire ape followed behind Su Ming. As it charged forward, it would occasionally pick up the battle axe to stroke its hair. For some unknown reason, it grabbed the broken blade of the axe and bit down on it, as if it was grinding its teeth. Once it loosened its bite, it lifted its claw and yanked the blade off the axe handle. Once it threw it to the ground, it swung the axe handle that no longer had a blade. Fortunately, the handle of the axe was very long and looked like a staff. As the fire ape swung it around, it stirred up wind and let out a buzzing sound. The fire ape instantly beamed with joy and placed the axe on its shoulder before flying towards Su Ming. 2 people and 1 ape charged through the sky. When dusk arrived, they were thousands of leagues away. After a short pause, booming sounds and shrill screams of pain came from that direction. When Su Ming and Wu Duo left, there were two more bloody heads hanging on the fire ape's waist behind them. This continued on their journey. Su Ming and Wu Duo each had their own needs, and their teamwork became better. With the fire ape's help and He Feng's occasional attacks, 10 days later, there were more than 20 heads hanging on the fire ape's body. No one knew how it managed to hang there, but not a single head was left behind. It looked as if it was wearing a human head shirt. Wu Duo was extraordinary to begin with, and Su Ming's combat abilities surpassed his level of cultivation. Their teamwork could be said to have stirred up a bloodbath in the area that belonged to Sky Mist City. In the end, the two of them became even more efficient. Wu Duo would usually search and then appear to attract the shaman's attention. Su Ming would then execute a speed that shocked even Wu Duo. At the same time, Wu Duo would attack as well. Usually, after this process, most of the three shamans would die and the other two would be injured. There would also be cases where two would die and one would be injured. The remaining shamans would not be Su Ming and Wu Duo's opponents. This continuous massacre lasted for half a month before it finally stopped, because Sky Mist City was already not too far away. Su Ming stood on a short mountain. If he looked into the distance, he could see a magnificent and astonishing barrier between the world and the earth. Aside from that, there was also a majestic city that would make anyone's breathing quicken when they saw it for the first time. Brother Mo, we've had a great time getting along these past few days. I hope you won't mind some of the unpleasant things that happened in the beginning. Wu Duo stood by the side. There were quite a lot of dried blood stains on his body. He looked a little tired, but his eyes were bright. We've already arrived at Sky Mist City. Based on Brother Mo's speed, it won't be long before we arrive. I still have other matters to attend to. So, as Wu Duo spoke, a whining sound suddenly came from the direction of Sky Mist City. At the same time that sound was desolate, it could also cause one's heart to race, as if there was a strange power contained within it. Su Ming was somewhat familiar with that sound. Wu Duo's expression changed. Riding in the hotel is a little strange. I hate the electricity department. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 351. As the moaning sounds reverberated in the air, a wave of sound that belonged to an unknown number of people reverberated in all directions like a clap of thunder. Kill them! The cries shook the sky and earth. Even if Su Ming was still a short distance away from Sky Mist City, he could still feel the madness and bloodlust contained in those voices. If he stood on top of Sky Mist City himself, he would be even more shocked. That voice did not come from the Berserker tribe. Wu Duo instinctively took a few steps back and whispered, the sounds of the shamans attacking the city. Brother Mo, I'll take my leave now. If we're fated to meet again, we'll meet again. Take care. Wu Duo lifted his head and cast Su Ming a glance. He originally did not know Su Ming, but the past half a month had been very enjoyable for them. The two of them seemed to have formed a tacit understanding when they worked together. Su Ming also looked at Wu Duo and wrapped his fist in his palm. You take care as well. Wu Duo nodded his head. His body turned into a rainbow as he flew in a different direction from Heavenly Mist City. The fire ape stood behind Su Ming and pursed its lips at the departing Wu Duo. At that moment, there were nearly 30 human heads tied to its body. It could be said that all the berserkers Wu Duo knew of who had used that unique method to enter the land of the Berserker tribe during the battle before this moment were all here. The half a month of fighting had allowed Su Ming to gain a greater understanding of the shamans. He averted his gaze from the departing Wu Duo, and a contemplative look appeared in his eyes. He knew of Wu Duo's identity. After spending half a month with him and having woken up early due to the boy's divine ability, there was no way Su Ming would not know that Wu Duo was a fledgling shaman who had reached the thought soothsaying realm. Su Ming also suspected that Wu Duo's divine abilities were not limited to just this. He might also be holding back, just like him. Yet no matter what, the half a month they spent together was beneficial to Su Ming. The two of them had developed a sense of appreciation for each other. Su-ming shook his head and no longer thought about it. After all, he was not a berserker from the land of South Morning, or else he would have definitely killed Wu Duo once he knew of his identity. However, Su-ming believed that there was another important reason why he pretended not to know Wu Duo's identity. It doesn't matter whether it's the shamans or the berserkers. How many people in the land of South Morning will be able to survive the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands? Su-ming sighed in his heart. Compared to the war before his eyes, this matter was relatively far away. This was a heavy thought that was not suitable for the current him. Once Su-ming calmed himself down, muffled booms and endless sounds of battle traveled into his ears from the direction of Sky Mist City. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he leaped up, charging towards the end of the sky. As he stood high up in the sky, Su-ming looked towards Sky Mist City, and what he saw shocked him. He saw a familiar mountain range that stretched endlessly across the land. It was as if a tall wall had been erected on flat land. The mountain range looked like a wall. That was why the berserkers of South Morning called it the barrier. However, from Su-ming's position, the barrier looked more like two azure dragons using their bodies to form a ring that protected the berserkers in the land of South Morning. The spot where the two azure dragons' heads met was the name of the barrier before Su-ming's eyes. Sky Mist City. This was a gigantic city built on Sky Mist Barrier. The towering city walls were like a huge lock that locked down Sky Mist Barrier, causing the shamans to only be able to enter the land of berserkers through trickery. However, to the entire shaman tribe, this was a gate that could not be crossed. The city walls were majestic, and they were several hundreds of thousands of feet tall from the ground beneath them. The world around them was also distorting, and the distorted ripples continuously reverberated in the air. It was as if the sky itself wanted to be the boundary of this place. One side of the city was the shaman tribe's sky, and the other side was the berserker tribe's sky. These two skies could not even fuse together. Strangely, while the berserker tribe's sky was clear, the shaman tribe's sky was dark. Layers of clouds tumbled about, as if they were filled with thick smoke. It was especially so for the two gigantic heads of beasts that stretched out from the two sides of Sky Mist Barrier at the top of the city, causing the dazed feeling Su-ming had previously felt to become somewhat real. This was a completely brown city. Perhaps many years ago, it was white, or perhaps it was black. If it was white, then the brown color would have been dyed by dried blood over the years. If it was black, then it would have also been due to a large amount of blood soaking through the city over the years, causing the black color to fade away and turn into a brown color. On each side of the city were three slightly smaller secondary cities. When these 7 cities were added together, they formed most of Sky Mist City. The reason why it was said to only form most of Sky Mist City was because 10,000 feet away from Sky Mist Barrier was another city that belonged to the shamans. This city was equally towering, equally astonishing, equally majestic, and its color was completely blood red. Between the two cities was a city wall that was several hundreds of thousands of feet tall, connecting them together to form a tunnel. The city wall shone brightly and was incredibly sturdy. But that was not all. There were also 18 gigantic statues outside Sky Mist City. Each of them was 100,000 feet tall and stood tall on the ground. All of them looked different from each other. However, no one would believe that these statues were just decorations if they were here. At that moment, Su-ming saw 4 of the 18 statues letting out a strange, dark light and starting to move slowly. Their gigantic bodies were filled with a soul-stirring feeling, especially when they started moving. They looked like giants standing on the ground. Su-ming saw one of these statues swinging a long whip in its hands. That whip was clearly made of stone, but as it swung it, it moved like a long snake. At the same time it let out whistling sounds, it also lifted up a large amount of flesh and blood. Besides Sky Mist City, Su-ming also saw a gigantic sword floating in the sky not too far away from Sky Mist City in the land of the shamans. The pressure formed by that sword also caused the air around it to distort. There were a large amount of white dots on that sword, and it also looked as if there was a freezing aura spreading out from the sword. Due to the distance, Su Ming could only see a large number of people standing on 100,000 feet sword, and there were also quite a number of people flying out from it. In another direction, also outside Sky Mist City, was an object that was 100,000 feet big. It was a gigantic mirror, and the surface of the mirror was facing the ground. There were quite a number of people on the back of the mirror. He could vaguely see that there were no distortions in the air around the mirror. Instead, there was an illusionary ocean that was letting out the sounds of waves crashing against each other. That sword was Freezing Sky Clan's Frozen Ice Sky, and that mirror belonged to Western Sea Clan. This was everything Su Ming saw about the Berserkers in Sky Mist City. However, in his eyes, there were not only Berserkers in the distance before him. There was also an endless amount of shamans densely packed together. Even if Su Ming stood high up in the sky, he still found it difficult to see their end. He saw shamans riding on birds with huge wings charging towards him from the distance. These shamans covered the sky and covered the earth. There were at least 10,000 of them. There were also shamans standing on long fishes that looked like swords. Their hair floated in the air as they charged forward in the sky, bringing with them a murderous presence. There were also nearly 10,000 of them. There were also thousands of shamans standing on gigantic ferocious beasts that were thousands of feet in size and could fly in the sky. They all looked different and wore different clothes, but they all shared the same endless brutality. There were also several dozens of ferocious beasts that were 10,000 feet in size, roaring in the sky, as if they were their leaders. Every single time they moved forward, a crack would appear in the air that would close up. There's also, Su Ming saw 2 sacred beasts of a shaman tribe that were 100,000 feet in size at the very back. One of them was a gigantic beast that looked like a Kirin, and its entire body was burning with flames. It was staring at Sky Mist City, and on its head was a man with long, fiery red hair. That man had his hands behind his back and simply allowed his hair to float in the wind as he looked into the distance coldly. The other shaman was a scorpion that was 100,000 feet in size. That scorpion was entirely green, and it made the world around it look as if it had been dyed green. There was also a shaman on its back, and that was an old woman. But that was not all. There were even more shamans on the ground, and Su Ming could vaguely see that there were about 10,000 of them. They were riding on black, ferocious beasts that were running on the ground. Those ferocious beasts looked like leopards, but they were as thin as sticks. However, they did not give off a feeling of weakness. It was as if they were born that way. They were so quick that they charged towards Sky Mist with a roar. Behind them, the ground trembled, and nearly 10,000 ferocious beasts from the ground charged towards them. Su Ming saw thousands of giants that were several thousands of feet tall behind them. These giants only had one arm, and it was protruding from their chests. They did not have heads, but there was a single shining eye on the palm of their arm. There was not just one shaman on their bodies, but 7 to 8 of them. Behind them were even more shamans. They did not have ferocious beasts, but the roars of battle shook the sky. All of them were running and leaping towards Sky Mist City. At the very end, Su Ming saw another gigantic beast that was 100,000 feet tall. In shock, that beast was not flying, but was coiled up on the ground. It looked like a gigantic python, and its eyes shone coldly. There was a young man sitting on its head. That young man wore a long robe and had long hair. His face looked like a woman's, and at the same time, he was incredibly beautiful. There was also a ghastly smile on his lips. This was not all Su Ming saw. He saw a mackerel pike that made his heart tremble in the endless sea of clouds behind the 300,000 feet beasts. As the dark clouds tumbled about like black fog in the endless sea of clouds, he saw it. With the sky and earth as the sea, it leapt up from the other side of the shore. Its body was so big that it could not be measured in feet when hidden within the sea of clouds, but in the miles. The moaning that Su Ming and Wu Duo had heard previously, the voice that Su Ming was familiar with, was coming from the mackerel pike's mouth. There was a woman on the mackerel pike. Su Ming could not see her face clearly, But when the mackerel pike leapt up, her elegant figure was revealed in the sea of clouds. Su Ming was shocked by the battle he saw. This was the first time he saw such a large-scale battle. The impact on his heart made him feel as if he was suffocating. After a long while, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He took a step forward and turned into a long arc that charged towards Sky Mist City. He wanted to join the battle. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 352. The fire ape followed behind Su Ming. As it moved, the dozens of human heads on its body danced in the air, turning into an incredibly powerful, murderous aura that surrounded the area, causing the ape to look as if it had just walked out of hell, causing all those who saw and heard it to be terrified. The man and the ape charged towards Sky Mist City. As they got closer, the sounds of battle traveled into their ears from a distance, and they became clearer with each passing moment. Su Ming's expression gradually turned incredibly grave. Those who saw and heard the sounds of more than 100,000 people fighting against each other would either feel their souls crumble in fear, or they would feel their blood boiling and boiling uncontrollably. Su Ming belonged to both the former and the latter. He had his fear, but his will to fight suppressed his fear. He was not fighting for the berserkers of the land of South Morning, not for Sky Mist, and definitely not for Freezing Sky Clan. He was fighting for the Ninth Summit, fighting for his path home, fighting to become stronger, fighting for himself. As they closed in and the sounds of battle traveled clearly from beyond Sky Mist City, Su Ming and the fire ape behind him had already closed in on Sky Mist City. Before him was the majestic city, which was within the territory of the berserkers. There was a winding staircase leading up to the city. That staircase was practically attached to the city wall, allowing people to pass through. There was a large amount of berserkers floating in midair above the city, protecting the city. Su Ming and the fire ape's approach had long since attracted the attention of some people in Sky Mist City, especially those who were protecting the city in midair during the battle. They belonged to Sky Mist City. When they were not participating in the battles outside, their duty was to protect the safety of the city. There might be quite a number of people who were fighting in the battlefield, but those who were taking turns to carry out their duties and protect the city. As Su Ming got closer, some of the calm-looking guards who seemed to have long since gotten used to war turned their heads around and cast a glance at him in the sky. Stop him and ask where tribe he comes from. We're at war now. No one is allowed to enter from the back. One of the guards, who was clearly someone with a higher position, said coldly. The moment he said those words, the two guards from Sky Mist City immediately wrapped their fists in their palms and voiced their obedience, then turned into long arcs and charged toward Su Ming. Halt! Report to me where you are. Once the two guards flew out of Sky Mist City, which belonged to the territory of the berserkers, one of them spoke coldly towards Su Ming, who was charging towards them from the horizon. Su Ming also saw these two people. Behind them was the mighty Sky Mist City. At that moment, the sounds of battle were deafening and reverberated in all directions, refusing to disappear even after a long time had passed. When Su Ming was several hundreds of feet away from the two people, he stopped and wrapped his fist in his palm towards them. Su Ming is from Freezing Sky Clan. When the two guards heard his words, they cast Su Ming a glance, and the person who spoke previously let out a cold harumph. Nonsense! Freezing Sky Clan came half a month ago. If you're from Freezing Sky Clan, why didn't you come with them? I was held up on my way here, that's why. Su Ming was just about to explain himself when he was interrupted by the Sky Mist Guardian. I don't need your explanation. I don't care where you came from. Right now, the berserkers are fighting against the shamans, and we don't allow strangers to get close to us. Leave quickly. Once this battle is over, if you're really from Freezing Sky Clan, I'll report to the city and let you in. The person who had been speaking was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He wore a blue robe that was still stained with blood. There was a hint of fatigue on his face, a telling sign that he had just returned from the battlefield. The other person was about the same age as him. He also looked tired, but there was a chilling glare in his eyes. Perhaps that chilling glare was not directed at Su Ming, but was born from the battle. Su Ming fell silent. His gaze fell on the land of the shamans in the distance. The slaughter there was monstrous. At this distance, Su Ming could see a berserker's head being cut off by a shaman on the land of the shamans. That head was lifted up, and with a roar towards the sky, he rushed out. Similarly, a large number of shamans were also dying on the battlefield. However, the ferocious beast would usually need several berserkers to surround and attack them before they could be suppressed. The roars of the ferocious beasts reverberated in the gigantic battlefield. Su Ming wanted to participate in this battle. Only by going to this place that was the best place to train his power and experiencing multiple life and death situations could he reach a breakthrough in his level of cultivation once again and move from the awakening realm to the bone sacrifice realm. However, he was too late. He was a person who came late to this battle, and there was no one who could prove his identity either. It was impossible for him to join the battle. Even if someone recognized him, unless they were powerful berserkers of the older generation in Freezing Sky Clan, it would be impossible for anyone else to be of much use in this battle, even if they spoke softly. You're not leaving? The blood-stained man in the blue robe spoke in a ghastly tone as killing intent shone in his eyes. Due to the fact that the two guards had been talking to Su Ming for too long, the other people in Sky Mist City also looked over. Su Ming sighed and took a few steps back. However, just as he was retreating, a loud rumble suddenly rang out from the direction of Heavenly Mist City. The rumble shook the heavens and the earth, and a huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky above Heavenly Mist City. This crack did not have a physical form. Instead, it seemed to exist between reality and illusion, and it continuously flickered. The instant the crack appeared, the expressions of the guards in Sky Mist City changed. At the same time, an old voice echoed in the air around Sky Mist City. This is an illusion art created by the End Shaman Split Dawn. It's a relocation gate connected to the land of the shamans. This art cannot be broken, but even the End Shaman Split Dawn can only cast it once every half a year. Win against the shamans who walk out of the relocation gate, and within half a year, this sort of attack won't happen again. Brother Chi, my friend Ran, Brother Zhou, this is also the reason why I asked the three of you to stay here and not go to the battlefield. As the aged voice reverberated in the air, 4 figures immediately walked out from Heavenly Mist City. 3 of the 4 figures were white-haired old men, while the other one was a black-robed middle-aged man. As soon as the 4 of them walked out, they immediately formed a great pressure that spread out. Almost the instant they walked out, rumbling sounds came from the crack in the sky, and it tore open. As it tore open, a roar reverberated in the air, and an aquatic dragon that was several tens of thousands of feet long crawled out of its head. With one move, it charged out of the crack. Laughter echoed in the air behind the aquatic dragon, and 3 people flew out of the crack. These 3 people looked exactly the same. They were all as thin as bones, and their bodies were painted with all sorts of colors. No one could tell what sort of pictures were drawn on their bodies, and they held bone staffs in their hands. The instant they flew out, a wave of black mist spread out. The instant these 3 people and the aquatic dragon appeared, the 4 people who walked out of Sky Mist City closed in on them. They did not say a single word to each other. Booming sounds instantly reverberated in the air, and they stood together. For a period of time, the weather changed. The wind and clouds tumbled backwards, and booming sounds shook the entire area. At the same time, multiple people crawled out of the crack in the sky. They were all shamans, and in the blink of an eye, hundreds of shamans appeared from within the crack. Each of the shamans who rushed out possessed extraordinary power. Kill them. The guards in midair charged forward without any hesitation and started a battle of life and death against the shamans who walked out of the crack. Within Heavenly Mist City, there were even more figures rising from the ground at this moment, heading straight for this small-scale but equally tragic battlefield. The sounds of battle shook the sky, and the world seemed to have darkened, as if the sun and moon had lost their light. The two guards who had stopped Su Ming from joining the battle also had no time to bother themselves with Su Ming as their expressions changed. Instead, they tumbled backwards and charged towards the battlefield. This battle was happening less than 50,000 feet away from Su Ming. It was so devastating that the moment they started fighting, shrill screams of pain rang out. Many people exploded, and some of them were even torn to shreds. There were berserkers and shamans among them. This was not a direct fight between two people. This was a battlefield, and each person was not facing just one enemy. They were facing an endless amount of enemies that covered the sky and earth. When you killed one person, you had to be wary of the various divine abilities that came charging towards you from the hands of those who were not berserkers. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not continue retreating. Instead, when the fire ape bared its teeth and was about to charge out, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm at the fire ape. Immediately, under the fire ape's aggrieved expression, Su Ming put the fire ape into its bag. This was a difficult battle. Su Ming did not let the fire ape join the battle. Once the ape's eyes turned bloodshot, it would descend into madness, and Su Ming would definitely not be able to survive. The instant he put away the fire ape, Su Ming took a step towards the battlefield that was 50,000 feet away. He did not seem to have moved when he took that one step forward and looked as if he was still moving forward, but in truth, he had already pushed his speed to its limit. The two guards who had stopped him previously were the ones whose robes were drenched in blood. Most of them were the man who had spoken to Su Ming. That person lifted his 5 fingers and seized the air before him. 5 wisps of air surrounded his back and turned into a 5-colored spider that crashed into the incoming shaman. That shaman was also extraordinary. The moment he died, he also made the 5-colored spider explode, and as the booming sounds of his own death echoed in the air, he flicked out a claw. That claw pierced through the guard's chest, causing blood to trickle out of the corners of his mouth as he retreated. Yet the instant he retreated, a battle axe appeared beside him with a whistle. It was a shaman, and as he laughed ferociously, he swung the axe down. Madness burned in the guard's eyes, and he looked as if he was about to self-destruct. Even if he died, he wanted to kill a few more people. At that instant, the air beside him suddenly distorted, and Su Ming appeared. Green light shone at the center of Su Ming's brows, and the divine general armor swiftly manifested on his body. The moment the guard swung his axe, Su Ming's sword charged forward. Good news, my dear, it's going to explode tomorrow. It's still the same method as last time. Get 300 votes and continue recording the 5th chapter. Now it's 3,020 votes. My dear, 3,320 is 5 chapters, and 3,420 is 6 chapters. Please explode. Please 6 chapters. More recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 353. The Guardian was not the only one caught off guard by Su Ming's appearance. Even the shaman had a hard time noticing him. However, the shaman was clearly someone who was good at fighting. He did not hesitate and continued smiling ferociously as he swung his axe toward Su Ming. In the blink of an eye, the axe was less than a foot away from Su Ming. Su Ming stood there with a calm face. The small virescent sword in his right hand shone brilliantly, and the moment the shaman swung his axe towards the center of his brows, the sword pierced towards the center of his brows. In the eyes of the onlookers, the two of them were clearly competing to see who was more ruthless. It was as if the one who was more ruthless would be able to survive. If the man was afraid and forcefully dodged, then he would definitely be in trouble because of the person who swung the axe at him, but it was still better than dying. However, if Su Ming was afraid and chose to dodge, then he would immediately lose the initiative, and the shaman would definitely be unstoppable. However, if neither of them dodged, then this battle would clearly end in mutual destruction. The guardian behind Su Ming was momentarily stunned. He was already prepared to self-destruct and die, but he did not expect that the person he had stopped from joining the battle would suddenly appear before him. It was especially so for the armor on Su Ming's body. With just one glance, the man could tell that it was the divine general armor. Before he could say anything, madness appeared in the shaman's eyes. He was completely unbothered by the small virescent sword coming towards the center of his brows. With a bang, his battle axe cut down on Su Ming's body. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. Su Ming's body froze, and he staggered a few steps back. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth, but there was not a hint of injury on his body. There was only a crack on the shoulder armor that had been struck by the axe, but it was healing right before his eyes. As for the shaman, he did not have the chance to witness this scene. There was still madness lingering on his face, and there was a hole at the center of his brows. Blood gushed out of it, but that was not a fatal wound. What killed him was a dagger that suddenly appeared behind him at the instant he swung his axe down. That dagger sliced through his neck, and at the same time the center of his brows was pierced through, his head was also cut off by the person behind him. The small virescent sword pierced through the shaman's head and grazed past the face of the person who had suddenly appeared behind him, leaving behind a thin line of blood. Su Ming had seen the person who appeared behind the shaman before. This person was the other one of the two guardians who had stopped him from joining the battle previously. The middle-aged man's gaze was aloof, and his expression was aloof. He was completely unbothered by the abrasions on his face. He cast Su Ming a glance, and a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. That smile was slightly ferocious, but there was no malice in it. "Welcome to Heavenly Mist City." As he spoke, he tossed the head in his hand towards Su Ming. Once Su Ming caught it, the man turned around and charged towards another shaman in a flash. Keep their heads. This is an important proof of our battle achievements. The voice of the guardian he had saved came from beside Su Ming. There was a rather sentimental look on his face, and he gave Su Ming a hearty smile. "Fortunately, I didn't let you leave completely. Otherwise, my old life would have ended here today. My name is Zhang Tianta. Welcome to Heavenly Mist City." The man let out a boisterous laugh and lifted his right hand. Su Ming lifted his right hand as well. Once the two of them slammed into each other, they charged into the battlefield in two different directions. With that strike, Su Ming felt a tremor of life. That tremor belonged to Zhang Tianta in the battlefield. As he turned around, Su Ming's right eye turned blood red. Black mist surrounded his body, and the divine general armor formed a rune to cover his wounds, causing his defensive capabilities to reach an incredibly strong state. Su Ming's Han Mountain bell could also be seen faintly under the divine general armor. With that bell, Su Ming's defense would increase by another layer. Green light shone by his side. That was the small virescent sword flying around with a whistling sound. As he moved forward, a young shaman charged towards Su Ming. That young shaman was dressed in a robe made of coarse cloth. His right hand was black, and there was a small red snake biting it, as if it was injecting poison into it. His left arm was not black, but it was swollen. There was a multicolored centipede crawling on his arm, as if it was also biting into his arm. There was a strange, enchanting tattoo on the young man's face. It cannot be seen clearly, but there was a brutal presence coming from it. Before he rushed towards Su Ming, he had just killed a berserker. Once he put away that person's head, he rushed towards Su Ming with a ferocious smile. The two of them closed in on each other in an instant. With a flash of green light, they charged towards the shaman's head. However, the young shaman only let out a low growl and lifted his right hand to touch the small sword. His right arm instantly exploded and turned into a large amount of black liquid that splattered everywhere. The moment the small sword touched the black liquid, it let out sizzling sounds and started swaying. The moment Su Ming's divine general armor touched the black liquid, a patch of dents appeared on it, as if it was being corroded. Fortunately, his Han Mountain bell could block the poison from coming towards him. The young man's right arm had disappeared, but strangely, flesh was squirming about as if it was about to regrow. He was incredibly quick, and in the blink of an eye, he closed in on Su Ming. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of poisonous fog. That fog turned into the face of a malicious spirit before him and pounced on Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He took a few steps back. Then, with a cold sneer, he charged forward. He might have looked as if he was charging straight towards the poisonous fog, but in truth, the speed of him taking a few steps back and moving forward had stirred up a strong gust of wind out of nowhere. The fog might be strange, and a normal gust of wind would have a hard time blowing it away, but the wind that was stirred up by Su Ming's extreme speed stirred up the fog and scattered it. Su Ming shot through it and appeared behind the young man. The moment the young man was stunned, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pressed his palm against the young man's head. The power of the later stage of the Transcendence realm surged into his body, and the swaying small virescent sword also charged forward. The moment it stabbed into the young man's neck, Su Ming yanked the head out of his body. When the young man's headless corpse fell to the ground, Su Ming held the head in his hands. His face was pale, but his eyes were still as cold as ever. His breathing quickened slightly. The sounds of killing filled the air around him, and shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air, never stopping. The moment he stopped, a ray of yellow light charged towards him from behind. Within that yellow light was a diamond-shaped beast bone that was incredibly sharp. This was the first time Su Ming had been in a battlefield like this, and it stabbed into his back. Even if the divine general armor blocked it, Su Ming still staggered a few steps forward, and blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. He turned around swiftly and stared at the spot where the diamond-shaped beast bone had come from. He saw two shamans working together to attack an old berserker in the midst of the two parties fighting against each other. One of them was tall, and the other was short. Their roars had fused into the area around them and could not be heard clearly. The old man's face was pale. His beard and hair were dyed in blood as he retreated. The beast bone that had charged towards him just now was not targeted at Su Ming. Instead, once the old man dodged it, it shot towards Su Ming. The booming sounds reverberated even stronger in the air above the battlefield, where there were less than 1,000 people fighting against each other. It was dark there, and it covered the color of the sky. As the black fog tumbled about, Su Ming could see an aquatic dragon occasionally appearing and roaring nonstop. The person fighting against the aquatic dragon was the middle-aged man among the 4 powerful berserkers who had appeared in Sky Mist City just now. As for the other 3 people, they were fighting against the 3 great shamans who looked the same as them in the black fog. These people had all surpassed the bone sacrifice realm and had reached the berserker soul realm. However, they were only in the initial stage of the berserker soul realm. The difference between each stage in the berserker soul realm was not small, and the difference between each stage was equivalent to a huge realm. Su Ming stared at the 2 shamans in the crowd, and blood-red, killing intent appeared in his eyes. He took a step forward, and in the span of a breath, he disappeared. Almost the instant he disappeared, a shaman threw a punch at the afterimage Su Ming had left behind. Once that punch landed, a stunned expression appeared on that person's face, but he did not have the chance to think about it. Someone among the berserkers chose to self-destruct not too far away from him. The ripples from the explosion of his cultivation base tumbled about in all directions. When those ripples touched that person, his body was forced back, and he died on an arrow that had bounced back from some unknown place. Su Ming was so quick that he shot through the many people fighting against each other and appeared right behind the 2 shamans who were fighting against the old berserker. The faces of those 2 shamans were filled with madness. Their teamwork was incredibly great, and there were no less than 10 berserkers who had died in their hands during this battle. At that moment, one more person appeared on their list. The slightly shorter shaman moved, and at the same time he moved past the old berserker, he took the old berserker's head with him. With the human head in his hand, the short shaman grinned and laughed loudly. However, the instant he laughed, his fellow shaman, who was also smiling, widened his eyes. With a loud roar, he charged towards his short shaman companion. Su Ming walked out from behind the short shaman. His eyes were bloodshot, and when he appeared, green light shone in a flash. Once it pierced through the shaman's back, it spun around and pierced through the center of the shaman's brows once again. This person's level of cultivation was extraordinary, but while a person's level of cultivation was useful in the battlefield, it was not everything. Luck, decisiveness, caution, observation, and all the other factors were crucial to a person's survival. None of them could be missing. Once he killed the short shaman, a freezing glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes the moment his companion charged towards him with a roar. He foamed. The moment Su Ming spoke, a dark shadow instantly appeared behind the incoming shaman and swallowed him like a gaping mouth. Su Ming did not pay any attention to what happened after that. With one move, he charged towards another direction. Once you control him, destroy his face and shaman tattoos, then follow me. Once Su Ming left, He Feng's cold and aloof order traveled into his ears. I'm going to give you my first chapter. Please give me monthly votes. I don't have a lot of monthly votes today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 354. There were nearly 1,000 people fighting fiercely in the battlefield above Sky, Mist City. As time passed by, as the number of deaths increased, and as incomplete corpses fell from the sky, the area of the battle should have been smaller. The area of the battle should have been reduced, but that was not all. Instead, it had become even larger because this was Sky Mist City. The number of berserkers in this place was so great that it was hard to imagine. The battle in the sky was just a small one compared to the entire battlefield. Besides, a large number of shamans were dying. Due to the fact that this was the home ground of the berserkers, the warriors were continuously joining the fray. That was why, even though the number of shamans was decreasing, the scale of the battle was still increasing. However, the battle here was just a small part of this small-scale battle. The main point of the battle was not this place, but the black fog at the top. At that moment, as booming sounds erupted from within the black fog, 4 tall statues of the god of berserkers appeared. Those 4 statues belonged to the 4 powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm. These statues did not seem to have corporeal form and looked rather illusionary, as if they would disappear with a gust of wind, but that was just an imagination. Berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm could manifest their statues of the god of berserkers. This ability caused the strength of those in the Berserker Soul Realm to be something that those in the Bone Sacrifice Realm could not hope to fight against. In everyone's minds, only those in the Berserker Soul Realm could kill those in the Berserker Soul Realm. The battle in the Black Fog had reached its most intense state. The battle between the berserkers and shamans in the sky below was also nearing its end. The shamans died one after another, and the ferocious beasts they summoned also fell one by one. Su Ming's robes had turned blood red. At first glance, even if people could tell that his robes were not originally red, they could still feel the terrifying bloodlust and madness that came from his robes. It was especially so for Su Ming's eyes. His left eye was calm, and his right eye was bloodshot. His long hair, which was not black, danced in the air. The green sword light surrounded him, and a puppet with a bloody face and tattered clothes following behind him. This person had practically become a strange figure that caught everyone's attention in this small-scale battle. Because wherever that person went, no matter what level of cultivation the shamans had, all of them would die a miserable and shrill death. Even medial shamans would usually find it difficult to escape death when a person lifted his right hand and the bracelet on his wrist would turn into black smoke that surrounded him. It was a presence that was nearly invincible. It was a murderous aura that was formed after someone killed too many people. A large amount of souls seemed to have gathered on that blood-red robe, causing whimpering roars to fill the area as Su Ming walked. Many people remembered this figure on that day. Besides his invincible presence, it was also because his appearance would save a life belonging to the berserkers. He seemed to have gotten used to silence. Su Ming did not roar or laugh arrogantly on the battlefield. He remained silent and continued killing. At that moment, Su Ming appeared before Shaman. When that shaman saw Su Ming, his expression instantly changed, and he quickly retreated. He had seen Su Ming attack 3 times, and every single time, his side would die. Among the 3 people who died, one of them was a medial shaman in the middle stage of the Bone Sacrifice Realm. Yet the moment that shaman took 3 steps back, all the hair on his body stood up. Su Ming appeared behind him like a ghost and swung his sword coldly. When he turned around and left, the puppet behind him, and Feng Ying attacked with a sinister smile. Su Ming walked through the battlefield and killed his way through. He did not know how many people he had killed. The divine general armor on his body had already crumbled several times, and even if there was a rune protecting him, it was still the same. The armor that appeared once again could not form a rune within it. Its defense might have been weakened, but Su Ming's murderous aura was still remembered by all the people on the battlefield, and it was equivalent to an invisible armor. He had already taken in a lot of medicine, and that was the only reason why he could persevere. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for him to maintain his composure in this battlefield where he was not fighting alone. Fortunately, Su Ming had prepared quite a lot of medicine. At that moment, he appeared behind a shaman and rammed his body into him. Once the already heavily injured shaman's body was reduced to dust, Su Ming was just about to leave when his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. He turned his head around slowly and looked at a person on the battlefield several thousands of feet away. That person looked to be in his 30s. His upper body was bare, and it was covered in blood. There was a strong and sturdy air about him. This was a shaman. He was holding a berserker's body and biting down on the man's neck as if he was sucking his blood. Blood flowed down the man's body and dripped down the corner of his mouth. His eyes were staring coldly at Su Ming. He lifted his head from the neck of the man he was holding and yanked the berserker's head off his body. He lifted the head high, causing the blood that was dripping down to fall into the man's mouth. Su Ming knew the dead berserker. He was Zhang Tian Ta's companion, the aloof man who had been the first to welcome Su Ming. Even when the man died, his eyes were still cold and aloof. Su Ming looked at this scene and saw the male shaman pointing at him with his left hand. He licked his lips as if he was saying something, but his words were hidden in the sounds of battle, and Su Ming could not hear them. However, he could see the male shaman's intentions, because the man threw away the head and suddenly took a step towards Su Ming. He was not slow, and as if he was stirring up a huge gust of wind, he charged towards Su Ming. As he moved forward, a large number of shadows manifested behind him. All of them belonged to the berserkers he had killed, and one of them was Zhang Tian Ta's companion. There were more than 20 of these shadows, and as they surrounded the man, they were like ghosts accompanying him as he closed in on Su Ming. Spirit medium. Su Ming's pupil shrank, and he took a step forward, stirring up an even stronger gust of wind that swept in all directions as he charged towards the man. The distance between the two of them closed in, and after a moment, the instant they closed in on each other, they started fighting. As the man attacked, a large amount of vengeful spirits charged towards him. Some of these vengeful spirits belonged to berserkers, and some belonged to shamans. Su Ming was not the only one fighting in this battlefield. There were several dozens of them, and all the shamans who were still alive were all spirit mediums. If a spirit medium was placed in a place where there were not too many dead people, then their combat abilities would be limited. However, if they were placed in a battlefield and a large number of people died, then spirit mediums would become incredibly powerful. This was the shaman tribe's unique method of warfare. Booming sounds reverberated in the battlefield. After a moment, as the people fought against each other, the black fog in the sky suddenly looked as if it was torn apart by someone. It was as if a pair of invisible hands had torn apart the fog in the sky. As the booming sounds reverberated in the air, the aquatic dragon exploded, and with a shrill roar, it turned into a large amount of blood fog that swept up the 3 old shamans who looked the same as it and charged towards the land of the shamans as if they were escaping through blood. Just as 2 of the 4 powerful berserkers from Sky Mist City were about to give chase, the middle-aged man by their side lifted his hand and stopped them with a grave expression. "My fellow tribesmen, please do not chase after them. The shaman's goal might be to enter the land of the berserkers, but they must first destroy Sky Mist City and occupy it, or else even the old monsters in the upper echelons of the shaman tribe will hesitate if we let them in. Also, there's something off about this. The shamans in Split Dawn can only use this sort of relocation once every half a year. So why are there only 3 ladder shamans and 1 inferior sacred beast? Based on our plans and predictions, along with some other information, the shamans only have 1 pair of in Split Dawn. They only have 1 chance like this, and they should have sent out even more powerful forces. Sky Mist City has also made meticulous preparations for this, but now our prey doesn't appear, and we can't use it. The middle-aged man frowned. Are you saying that they're intentionally luring us into chasing after them? A hunchbacked old man among the 4 old monsters in the Berserker Soul realm asked in a hoarse voice. This is... The middle-aged man was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed drastically. The other 3 old men's expressions also changed because at that moment, as the sounds of battle rose into the sky in the gigantic battlefield outside Sky Mist City, cracks similar to the ones that appeared in the sky above Sky Mist City previously appeared in 5 different spots in the sky. But that was not all. Behind Sky Mist City, in the territory belonging to the Berserkers, another crack appeared in the sky, and this time it was not just 1 but 2. 2 gigantic cracks in addition to the 5 cracks in the sky above the shaman shone at the same time. The middle-aged man's expression instantly turned dark. With 1 move, he charged downwards. I'll have to trouble the 3 of you with the cracks in the Berserker tribe shamans. As the middle-aged man's voice echoed in the air, his body flashed several dozens of times among the people fighting underneath. Every single time he flashed, he would appear beside a shaman spirit medium, and no matter what spell that spirit medium cast, no matter how strong his divine abilities were, once the middle-aged man appeared, he would pierce through the center of his brows with 1 finger and die. The middle-aged man was so quick that in the blink of an eye, he appeared beside Su Ming. Yet the instant he appeared, the male shaman fighting against Su Ming coughed out blood, and his body was torn to pieces. This was not caused by the middle-aged man, but by Su Ming slowly lowering his right index finger and drawing 1 line with Berserker Obliteration. Su Ming's face was pale, and his breathing quickened. Only he knew just how dangerous this battle was. The middle-aged man cast Su Ming a glance and nodded. His body disappeared, and after a moment, when he appeared in midair, all the shaman spirit mediums on the battlefield had died. You, and you. The 7 of you, follow me. The rest of you, head to the battlefield over there. The middle-aged man pointed towards the crack that had appeared in the land of the Berserkers in the distance. Once he pointed, the crowd immediately charged up and charged towards the 2 cracks under the lead of the 3 powerful Berserkers in the Berserker Soul realm in the sky. More people flew out from Sky Mist City and joined in. 2 old men in white also flew up. As they moved forward, the air under their feet trembled, and the statue of the god of Berserkers manifested behind them. These 2 people were also in the initial stage of the Berserker Soul realm. The 2 of them flew into the sky and wrapped their fists in their palms to greet the 3 people from before walking towards the cracks with grim expressions on their faces. Su Ming did not move, because he was one of the 7 people the middle-aged man had pointed at. The 7 of you performed the best in the battle just now. I've seen the others before, but you're a little unfamiliar. What's your name? Which tribe or clan did you come from? The middle-aged man's gaze was like lightning. Once he swept his gaze past the 7 people who stayed behind, he looked at Su Ming. There was a mistake in the pen, but it has been corrected. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 355. Su Ming remained as calm as ever as he faced the middle-aged man in the Berserker Soul realm. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards him. I am Su Ming from Freezing Sky Clan. Freezing Sky Clan? The middle-aged man cast Su Ming another glance. It's unlikely that the people from Freezing Sky Clan would appear here. They're all fighting in the land of the shamans, outside the city. The man spoke slowly as he looked at Su Ming. His languid words and his focused gaze instantly turned into an invisible pressure that fell on Su Ming's body. As the 2 of them spoke, the other 6 people who were left behind by Su Ming's side were all drenched in blood. However, most of that blood belonged to the shamans. The oldest among the six was in his 60s. His black hair was mixed with white hair, and the youngest was in his 30s. His eyes shone brightly, as if there was lightning contained within them. These 6 people had been outstanding figures in the small-scale battle just now. They had killed a large number of shamans, and they were the center of attention in their respective battlefields. The blood on their bodies was the best proof that they were good fighters. There was also a woman among the 6. She had 3 scars that looked like claws on her face, making it look as if her face had been torn apart. She stood at the edge with an aloof look on her face, as if she did not want to have too much contact with others. I had to leave due to some matters on the way here. I'm back now, Su Ming said calmly as he looked at the middle-aged man. The pressure on him from the middle-aged man in the Berserker Soul realm was incredibly great, but Su Ming's heart was open. He did not try to hide from the man, and there was not a hint of emotion in his voice when he answered. How many shamans did you kill? The middle-aged man asked languidly. Su Ming did not answer. Instead, he put his right hand into his bosom and brought out his storage bag. Once he swung it to the side, dozens of heads flew out from within and floated around him. A bloody stench instantly spread through the area. Each of the heads contained all sorts of expressions before they died. All right, even if you're a deserter from Freezing Sky Clan, you've already proven your worth. From now on, you are a member of the Berserker tribe in Sky Mist City. The middle-aged man's gaze fell on the spirit medium's head, the only one he did not attack, and he smiled at Su Ming. Some of you are from Freezing Sky Clan, some of you are from Western Sea Clan, and the others are all warriors of Sky Mist City. Now, no matter where you came from, the 7 of you will become my followers and my protectors. Come with me, and we will attack the shamans. The middle-aged man swept his gaze past Su Ming and the 7 people. When he spoke of Freezing Sky Clan, he was looking at Su Ming. He was looking at Western Sea Clan's disfigured woman. I am Shan Hua, one of the 10 great soul generals of Heavenly Mist City. Before I die, follow me. At the same time the middle-aged man said those words, loud booming sounds came from the 5 cracks in the sky in the direction of the shamans in Sky Mist City. Dark light shone within them, as if they were about to open up at any moment. It was the same for the 2 cracks in the direction of the berserkers. There was also a large number of berserkers charging towards them from beyond the cracks. Follow me. The middle-aged man, Shan Hua, lifted his head and cast a glance in the direction of the shaman tribe. With a single move, distorted ripples immediately appeared under his feet, and he charged towards the spot where he was looking. Behind him, the 6 people beside, Su Ming flew up almost at the same time. Including Su Ming, 7 of them followed behind Shan Hua. The 8 of them turned into 8 long arcs in the sky and sliced through the sky, flying across the mighty Sky Mist City. With Shan Hua in the lead, all the invisible barriers in Sky Mist City were broken beforehand, causing the group to arrive in the sky of the land of the shamans without stopping for even a moment. The instant they flew across the mighty Sky Mist City, a bloody wind blew into their faces. It was as if the area beyond the city was a completely different world. This place belonged to the shamans. That bloody wind formed an indescribable pressure that could make a person's heart race uncontrollably and their chi tumble about. It was as if they would not be able to withstand it if they did not do so. The sounds of battle turned into sounds of impact in the most direct manner and fell into the ears of all the people, including Su Ming. Compared to what the others were used to, this was the first time Su Ming participated in a battle in the land of the shamans. The shrill screams of pain, the furious roars, and the bloody stench made it difficult for him to calm down. This is just a game, Brother Su. Shan Hua charged ahead, and Su Ming and the other 6 followed behind him. They leaped across the ground, facing the oppressive pressure and smelling the bloody stench. To Su Ming's right was a young man in his 30s. His hair was a mess, but his eyes were bright, and there was even a hint of excitement within them. This is a game to see which side will win in the end. The young man licked his lips and smiled at Su Ming. The sky was filled with a large amount of people fighting in a battlefield that had more than tens of thousands of people. There were shamans, berserkers, and ferocious beasts. Su Ming's group of 8 did not attract any attention as they charged through the battlefield. Charge into the third crack. Your first mission is to follow me. Shan Hua's voice traveled forth from the front, and he traveled so quickly that he was already 1,000 feet away in the span of a breath. Su Ming and the other 6 charged behind him, but when they had traveled less than several thousands of feet through the battlefield, a huge gust of wind immediately stirred up before them. That was a swarm of ferocious beasts with large wings, and on their backs were shaman warriors. These shamans all had tattoos on their faces, and as their blood boiled, they let out a strange air. These shamans were insignificant to Shan Hua. He did not even bother dodging. As he charged forward, booming sounds reverberated in the air, and immediately, dozens of large-winged, ferocious beasts exploded. Even the shamans on them were torn to shreds, and this entire process only lasted for an instant. They could not even see how Shan Hua attacked. They could only see blood splattering everywhere, and Shan Hua did not stop for even a single moment as he charged through the swarm of beasts. However, Su Ming and the other 6 could not be as relaxed as Shan Hua. A small portion of the near 100 ferocious beasts might have died, but there were still dozens of them left. After a short period of time, they gathered together and charged towards Su Ming and the other 6. What I need are berserker warriors who can follow behind me. Shan Hua did not turn his head back. Neither did he stop, but his voice still echoed in Su Ming and the other 6 ears. Almost the instant his voice echoed in the air, the sounds of battle surged into the sky. The dozens of ferocious beasts roared and charged forward with a murderous presence. A dozen of the shamans on their backs leaped forward, and cracking sounds came from all over their bodies. Their bodies swelled up, veins popped up on their skin, and it was as if their blood was boiling in anger. Su Ming's right eye was bloodshot. Almost the instant the shamans and the ferocious beasts blocked his path, he took a swift step forward. His speed was so quick that it was difficult to describe with words. In an instant, he disappeared from the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already 2,000 feet away. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth. There were 5 shamans on the invisible path he was charging towards them, and only then did their bodies explode into pieces. Their deaths were caused by Su Ming ramming into them with his own defensive methods while he was charging forward at such a high speed. Su Ming did not stop. Once he appeared, he charged towards Shan Hua in the distance once again and chased after him. Almost at the same time he chased after Shan Hua at such a high speed. Only 3 of the remaining 6 people behind him used various methods to break free from the encirclement of the shamans. Once they broke free, they chased after Shan Hua behind Su Ming. Yet in less than 10 breaths, when Shan Hua once again broke through the encirclement of the shamans, there was 1 less person among Su Ming's group of 4 who could chase after him. At that moment, the only ones behind Shan Hua were Su Ming, the woman whose face had been destroyed, and a middle-aged man who had remained inconspicuous among the crowd. The 3 of them charged forward, their breathing quickening. Clearly, it was not easy for them to follow Shan Hua in this manner. At that moment, Shan Hua had already charged into the center of the battlefield. Not too far away from him was the 3rd crack. At that moment, that crack was continuously expanding, and there were a large amount of dark shadows flashing within. There were also muffled growls coming from within. If there was no obstruction between Su Ming and the others in the crack, then they would be able to reach it very soon, but that was not the case. There were 4 ferocious beasts that were about 1,000 feet big charging towards them from the direction of the crack. A glint appeared in Shan Hua's eyes. He took a step forward and disappeared before one of the ferocious beasts. When he reappeared, the ferocious beast froze, and its entire body started withering away. Even the shaman standing on it was momentarily stunned before the light of life disappeared from his eyes, and he fell to the ground. Su Ming's pupils shrank. He had seen Shan Hua attack a few times on the way, but every single time, he could not see the specifics of what he did. Besides the word bizarre, it was difficult for him to find any other word to describe what he saw. Shanhua moved in a flash and got closer to the crack. However, Su Ming and the other two behind him were facing the three ferocious beasts and the shamans standing on them. A resolute look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. When he closed in on the incoming ferocious beast, He Feng, who had given up on his puppet form and turned back into a shadow, was the first to rush out. At the same time, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at Berserker Obliteration. His speed reached its peak, and the bracelet on his right hand turned into black mist that charged forward before him. Booming sounds shook the sky. After a moment, when Su Ming brushed past the ferocious beast, he coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. The divine general armor on his chest shattered. A black wooden spike was blocked by Han Mountain Bell, but the tremors coming from the wooden spike still injured Su Ming. As for the ferocious beast, half of its body had been torn to shreds. Blood spilled all over the place. There was a dark shadow at the wound, and as it absorbed the beast's flesh and blood madly, it tried to expand, but the ferocious beast was too big. The dark shadow had a hard time enveloping it completely. The third chapter has been updated. Can you get more monthly votes? Can you get more? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 356. As for the shaman on the ferocious beast, he had already leapt up, but there was shock on his face. Before him was the shadow of a woman formed by black smoke. It surrounded his body and turned into a vortex. At the same time, the shaman cast some unknown art, and his body immediately disappeared, as if he had fled. The woman formed by the black smoke did not chase after him. Instead, she fell back and turned into the bracelet on Su Ming's wrist once again. Su Ming ignored He Feng. Instead, he turned around and charged toward Shanhua. At that moment, Shanhua was standing under the crack and lifting his head to look at the gigantic crack that was continuously extending upwards. There was a grave look on his face, as if he was waiting for something. Su Ming closed in, and after a moment, he arrived behind Shanhua. He also stopped there, and his breathing quickened. He only managed to calm down after a long while. As Su Ming calmed his breathing, wind whistled by his side, and the disfigured woman from Western Sea Clan charged towards him. Once she stopped, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. There were many wounds on her body, especially on her abdomen. It was a bloody mess, but her expression was still as aloof as ever. She stood there, lowered her head, and brought out some medicinal liquid to smear on her wounds. Only the two of you came. Then you can be my guards and help me by the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Shanhua suddenly spoke up and turned his head around to look at Su Ming and the woman. Then he sat down cross-legged in the air and closed his eyes. The woman frowned slightly, but she did not speak. Instead, she looked at her surroundings warily. Su Ming was deep in thought. He did not have time to think about what method the woman had used to follow him. He lifted his head and looked at the flashing crack in the sky, then at the distance. His pupils shrank. There were powerful berserkers like Shanhua under the 5 cracks in the land of the shamans. All of them were either watching or meditating. They did not pay any attention to the slaughter in the battlefield around them, as if they were waiting for something. Some of them had guards like Su Ming beside them, and some of them were alone. There was still a large number of shamans in the sky, and the battles continued on the ground. The people from both sides had already descended into a state of madness, and there was an endless stream of berserkers rushing out of Sky Mist City to join the battle. As time passed by, the 5 cracks in the sky above the land of the shamans grew larger, and it could be seen that the sky was about to be torn apart. Low roars reverberated from within, as if there were thousands of soldiers and an endless amount of ferocious beasts within the cracks. Once the cracks opened, all of them would rush out. No one's coming over. Su Ming frowned. He noticed that ever since Shanhua and the woman came to this place, no other shamans got close to this place. Most of them circled around the area, as if they could not see the 3 of them. Such a phenomenon was not limited to this place, but all of the 5 rifts. Could it be? A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Suddenly, a piercing howl came from the direction of Sky Mist City. That howl sounded like it was slicing through the air, and the entire Sky Mist City looked as if it was trembling. The instant Su Ming turned his head around to look, he saw 9 pillars that looked like crystals crawling out of Sky Mist City and stretching towards the sky. Those pillars were several hundreds of feet thick. Once they shot out of Sky Mist City, a powerful light immediately shone from them. As that light shone, even the sun in the sky seemed to have dimmed. Soon after, the light from the 9 gigantic crystal pillars spread out violently, as if they had fused together, and once they did so, they shot out a ray of light that made Su Ming suffocate towards the 5 cracks. That ray of light was 1,000 feet thick, and it charged out from Sky Mist City so quickly that it made Su Ming's skin crawl. It was like a long arc that pierced through the sky, and the volume of its sound was so loud that it made all those who heard it feel their ears ringing, turning it into a busy tone. Almost in an instant, the first crack of the 5 cracks that were tens of thousands of feet away from Sky Mist City was blasted through by that ray of light. The entire sky looked as if it had turned into a sea of fire with ripples spreading out rapidly in all directions. The first crack trembled viciously and turned into an innumerable amount of shards that spread out. Those shards were very thin and looked like a mirror. This was no crack. It was clearly a fake crack created by the shamans with some unknown method. It looked real and even felt real, but in truth, it was fake. The first of the 5 cracks is fake. The shaman's goal is to weaken Sky Mist City's power, such as this unbelievable ray of light. Su Ming sucked in a sharp breath and looked at the crack in the air between Sky Mist City and the first ray of light. A crack had appeared in the air over there, and wherever the ray of light passed through, all the living beings that tried to stop it would only be able to survive and be destroyed. Under this sort of power, perhaps even those in the Berserker Soul Realm would not be able to survive. Sky Mist City. Su Ming looked at the majestic city and understood why this city could defend the land of South Morning and prevent the shamans from entering. It was because not only was this city filled with mystery, it also possessed a power that could shock the shamans. Just as Su Ming was shocked by the appearance of the ray of light, the 9 gigantic crystal pillars in Sky Mist City suddenly lit up once again, and the second ray of light shot out. The sky and earth seemed to tremble. Cracks appeared in the air, and the second ray of light charged out, stirring up a loud bang that spread through the entire battlefield. All the people could not help but lift their heads to look, and that ray of light landed on the second crack. The crack shuddered and crumbled. It was still the same thin shards. The second crack was also fake. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly and looked at the 3 cracks where his wounds were. The cracks were expanding at an increasing speed, and the light within them was flashing even more frequently. It was as if the person inside was so anxious that he could not wait to come out from within. At that moment, the 9 crystal pillars in Sky Mist City shone once again, and the third ray of light charged out. Once again, it shook the sky and earth, but it did not charge towards the 3rd crack where Su Ming was. Instead, it landed on the 4th crack, causing it to shatter into an endless amount of shards. This time, Su Ming could clearly feel that the power of the ray of light had weakened, as if it did not have enough power. The slaughter on the battlefield clearly stopped once the ray of light charged out 3 times. Shock and fear appeared on most of the shamans' faces. In contrast, while most of the berserkers were shocked, they also felt as if life force had been injected into them, and their blood was boiling. Suddenly, the 4th ray of light charged out from Sky Mist City once again. This ray of light was clearly much weaker than before, and it did not possess the astonishing power it had previously. The instant it landed on the 5th crack, it might have caused the crack to shatter into shards, but by the looks of it, if the crack was real, then there was a high possibility that the ray of light would not be able to completely destroy it. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly and stared at the crack above him. Almost the instant he lifted his head, the powerful berserkers under the fake cracks charged towards him. Clearly, they also believed that this crack was the real one. In the span of a breath, the 9 crystal pillars in Sky Mist City seemed to have gathered their final bit of power and let out the 5th ray of light. That ray of light was like the final radiance of the setting sun. It was incredibly powerful, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this was already the last of its power. As the ray of light charged out, it brought with it a piercing light that shot past Su Ming's head and landed on the 3rd crack. It was also at that moment that Shanhua opened his eyes. Yet what stunned Su Ming was that the instant the 3rd crack was struck, it also turned into a large amount of thin shards that scattered in all directions. It's all fake. The shaman's goal is to weaken the power of the crystal pillars in Sky Mist City, because this power can threaten their end shamans. Su Ming mumbled. At that moment, a long string of laughter reverberated in the air in the distance. The sky above the land of the shamans distorted, and 3 people walked out. The figures of these 3 people could not be seen clearly, but when they appeared, an incredible pressure enveloped the entire battlefield with a bang. The 3 people took a step forward and charged towards the battlefield. The 2 sacred beasts that were 100,000 feet in the distance, which had been staying within a certain distance from the battlefield, roared and charged towards Sky Mist City. It was as if the power that stopped them from coming had already disappeared. The 2 shamans on the heads of the 2 100,000 feet sacred beasts were clearly powerful shamans. At that moment, a cold sneer appeared on their lips. All the advantages seemed to be leaning towards the shamans. Without the powerful light rays that had intimidated them for the time being, the 3 messengers from the shaman tribe who walked out from the air were incredibly quick. The 200,000 feet ferocious beasts behind them were also closing in on them like a hot knife through butter. Yet that was not the case. Almost at the instant, the 3 people charged out and the 200,000 feet sacred beasts charged towards them and entered the 100,000 feet area. The already dim 9 crystal pillars in Sky Mist City suddenly let out a powerful light. That light was so strong that it was even stronger than the first ray of light Su Ming had seen. With a flash of light, the entire world instantly darkened. It could not compare to the light from the 9 crystal pillars. It was as if the crystal pillars had absorbed all the light in the world at that instant, and 2 rays of light that made Su Ming's heart tremble shot out. Those 2 rays of light were several thousands of feet thick. They whistled through the air and shook the sky, causing the air to look as if it was about to shatter. In the blink of an eye, Su Ming saw a scene that he would never forget. He saw the 2 rays of light landing on the 2 100,000 feet sacred beasts of shaman tribe that had entered the 100,000 feet area. They did not even have time to dodge and were struck by the rays of light. Even the powerful shamans on them were instantly destroyed by the power contained within the rays of light. Deafening, shrill roars came from the 2 sacred beasts, and their bodies instantly exploded. The entire battlefield fell into dead silence. The 3 powerful shamans who had walked out from the air in the lead froze, as if they were stunned. We berserkers can do that too. At that moment, Shanhua, who was standing beside Su Ming, stood up. Warriors of my tribe, hear me. Attack the shamans and chase them out of the 300,000 feet area. At that moment, an old voice traveled forth from within Sky Mist City. The sounds of war drums thundered from all directions, causing all the berserkers in the battlefield to immediately descend into a frenzy. Kill them. The 4th chapter is here. There are a total of 12,000 words. I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 357. To be honest, this week was not suitable for an explosion. Not because of the plot, but because of the electricity industry in Mudanjiang. 7 days a week, 3 days without electricity. In my memory, such a thing is very rare. I don't know what caused it, but it is very infuriating. When everything is back to normal, it will be a week, but Monday said that would explode this week, so it must explode. Today for chapters explode, and I need monthly votes. Next week, there will be another explosion. Life needs to explode. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 358. As the 200,000 feet ferocious beasts died shrilly, the three powerful shamans who walked out from the air came to a halt. At that moment, all the berserkers in the land of the shamans outside Sky Mist City charged into battle as the sound of the war drums thundered against each other. At the same time, the entire heavenly mist city trembled once more as the light from the 9 gigantic crystal pillars surrounded it. Soon after, a gigantic stone tablet that was 100,000 feet tall and 10,000 feet wide suddenly rose from the plaza in the center of heavenly mist city. Its height surpassed the 9 crystal pillars, and as it stood in the middle of heavenly mist city, an ancient feeling spread out along with the appearance of the stone tablet. There were names carved on the stone monument, and behind each name was the name, which represented the tribe or clan the person came from. This stone monument was the achievement monument that recorded the berserkers' achievements in the land of South Morning. Once it appeared, the sounds of battle from the berserkers on the battlefield became even more intense. The names on the achievement monument would not change at any time. Instead, once a battle ended, there would be someone specifically assigned to record the achievements before it could be changed. However, all the people whose names were recorded on the stone monument would be the center of attention of all the berserkers. It was an honor that belonged to the berserker tribe. It was an honor that belonged to the person whose name was recorded on the monument, his tribe, and his clan. The stone monument only recorded the first 300 kills. Those who were ranked after 300 would not be able to enter the ranks. At that moment, the person ranked first was a person called Hiluo. This person was not from Freezing Sky, and neither was he from Western Sea. He came from a tribe called Luo Shui, and his war achievements had already reached nearly 3,000. The accumulation of war achievements did not just increase by 1 point with each person killed. Instead, it was calculated by the people specifically assigned to Sky Mist City based on the identities and levels of cultivation of the people killed. The person ranked 10th had nearly 2,000 war achievements, and the difference between them was not great. It was only when he was ranked 80th that his war achievements fell below 1,000. However, even the person ranked last still had several hundreds of war achievements. This was clearly the accumulation of war achievements from the previous battles. The earlier a person joined a battle, the more war achievements they would accumulate. Su Ming had arrived at Sky Mist City late, and he had not submitted his war achievements yet. That was why his name could not be seen on the ranking board. At the same time the stone monument appeared, the 3 powerful shamans who had appeared from the air in the distance stood in midair with dark expressions on their faces. They were not shamans. They were still ladder shamans, but they were outstanding ladder shamans. Their levels of cultivation were equivalent to those in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm, and they could not be compared to the 3 shamans who had walked out of the crack in the land of berserkers just now. Those 3 shamans who looked exactly the same were also not shamans, but had just become ladder shamans. Just as their expressions turned dark, the powerful berserkers who were previously in the crack charged towards them. But that was not all, because Freezing Sky Clan's Frozen Ice Heaven was exuding a threatening, freezing air from its 2 sides. The tip of the sword moved and pointed towards the 3 of them. At the same time, the huge mirror of the Western Sea Clan flickered with light, as if a divine ability was also spreading out. Half of the 18 gigantic statues at the foot of Heavenly Mist City had already come to life, and they were striding toward the battlefield with loud, rumbling sounds as if they had been resurrected. Based on the Great Patriarch's instructions, our 3rd attack on the city was just a test. Our goal is different from the previous 2 attacks. This time, we're testing the expansion of the End Shaman's Split Dawn, and we're also using this to deplete Sky Mist City's God Crystal Beam. By the looks of it, the Berserkers have clearly seen through the Great Patriarch's plan, but they still haven't sent out any Berserkers in the middle stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. They only sent some berserkers in the initial stage. They're targeting the three of us. Sky Mist City wants to use us to figure out the strength of the shaman tribe over the years. Western Sea Clan's ancient mirror is indeed disgusting. With it around, all the divine abilities we cast will be recorded by it, and the berserkers will then use them for their own use. As for Freezing Sky Clan's Frozen Ice Heaven, that sword shouldn't be using its full strength against the three of us. Oomph. The berserkers are skilled in using bait. That's how it was before. By the looks of it now, they're using the three of us as bait to lure out an end shaman. The three powerful shamans looked at each other. Then two of them took a step forward. Ripples appeared in the air under their feet, and muffled, booming sounds spread out. A large amount of green fog instantly appeared around them. As that fog spread out, it tumbled outwards, and in an instant, it filled the entire area. Soon after, the last of the three sat down cross-legged and lifted his hands to push down on the ground through the air. With it, ripples spread out from the ground, and shrill roars came from the blood of the dead on the ground. Almost at the instant these three people executed their divine abilities, the four powerful berserkers in the Berserker Soul realm charged out from the cracks that had disappeared previously and rushed into the fog. Muffled booming sounds continued ringing out from within the fog. At the same time, the gigantic mirror in Western Sea Clan tilted as it shone, causing the surface of the mirror to shine on the fog. As for Freezing Sky Clan's Frozen Ice Heaven, once the tip of the sword was pointed, a white light appeared on the sword hilt and swam through the entire blade before gathering at the tip of the sword and spitting out a ray of sword light. The moment that ray of sword light appeared, the sky and earth turned cold. That ray of light seemed to possess intelligence and charged towards the fog. Once it pierced through it, it looked as if it was fighting against the three shamans together with the four powerful berserkers. A battle broke out once again on the ground and under the green fog in the sky. A glint appeared in Shan Hua's eyes when he saw Su Ming. He turned his head around and cast a glance at Su Ming and the disfigured woman. Once he nodded, he charged towards the fog in the sky. The two of you have passed my test. I will now grant you the title of Sky Mist Knight Warriors. As Shan Hua left, his words fell into Su Ming and the woman's ears. Two other black plates flew out from Shan Hua's hand and charged towards the two of them. Su Ming lifted his right hand and caught the plate. It looked incredibly normal. It was completely black, and that black color was like the night sky without any stars. 7 people followed, and 5 died. Su Ming sighed and looked at the plate in his hand. He did not have much of an impression towards this item, neither did he know what it meant. Su Ming had originally wanted to be a bystander and witness the battle between the shamans and berserkers. Even if he joined, he would be fighting for himself. Yet this was only his first battle, and he already had a feeling that it would not be easy for him to do what he wanted. Perhaps there would be many times where he would not be able to control himself. I'd suggest that you hang that plate at a conspicuous spot on your waist. As Su Ming sighed, the words of the woman from Western Sea Clan reached his ears. She looked at him coldly and hung her plate on the belt of her robes. Sky Mist City's war orders are divided into 4 levels: Sun, Moon, Star, and Night. With Night orders, it means that you now belong to Sky Mist City. Because of that, even your clan will not be able to interfere or punish you for your actions. Before the battle ends, only Sky Mist City can give you orders, the woman stated coldly. There are plenty of people in this battlefield who want to obtain Sky Mist City's war orders, but can't get them, because Sky Mist City's war orders can only be given to those in the Berserker Soul realm in Sky Mist City. We didn't pay much of a price, and we only got this because Senior Shan saw everything we did. But there are plenty of people who paid a greater price than us. Because no one paid attention to them, they either died or they couldn't get the war orders. Are you still not satisfied? The woman no longer looked at Su Ming. Instead, she charged towards the battlefield in the distance. Su Ming fell silent and looked at the plate in his hand. He did not choose to hang it up, but instead put it away in his bosom, then turned around and charged in the opposite direction of the woman's departure, charging towards the battlefield in the vast land of the shamans. There were battles everywhere in this place. The shamans and berserkers fought against each other to the death. The low roars and screams of pain, the sounds of flesh being torn apart, and the sounds of physical bodies being crushed intersected with each other, turning into a clamor and buzzing in Su Ming's ears. Besides the powerful berserkers fighting in the fog in the sky, all the other people on the battlefield were insignificant. They were just a part of this war. Su Ming did not know how long this war would last. He could only rush forward and kill all the shamans he saw before him. This was a completely different feeling compared to the battle in the land of the berserkers in Sky Mist City. Compared to this place, the battlefield there was simply too small, and Su Ming could not see the end of this place. All he could see was his companions from the berserker tribe and the endless army of shamans. Kill. He could only kill. Su Ming held the small virescent sword in his right hand, and as he charged forward, blood rained down from the sky. Kill. He had to kill. With a swing of his arm, black smoke surrounded Su Ming's body. Whenever someone who could threaten Su Ming's life appeared, that black smoke would automatically fly out and turn into a woman who would follow behind the shaman. She would either kill them or force them to retreat. To survive, to be able to see tomorrow's sun, even though they were insignificant beings in this battlefield, then they had to kill, because if they did not kill, then they would die. This war was like a will so strong that no one could fight against it. Under this will, if they did not kill, they would die, unless they pretended to be corpses and smeared their blood on their faces. If they did that, then perhaps they would have another way to survive. As Su Ming moved forward, he saw people who did this. There were shamans and berserkers among them. However, this was not a good plan, because he needed war achievements and because he needed to collect heads. Unless he lost his head, then if he had a complete body, his head would inevitably be taken by someone else. Kill. Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body was drenched in blood. With a loud roar, he circulated all the chi in his body and punched a shaman's chest. Bell chimes reverberated in his body, and he withstood the shaman's counterattack before his death. As he coughed out blood, he charged towards another person at full speed. I can't see you on the recommendation board anymore. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 359. Su Ming did not know how much time had passed, because the sky was still filled with green fog. That fog was tumbling about, and the booming sounds coming from within did not stop. The sounds of battle, screams of pain, and all sorts of other sounds fused together, as if they had turned into a tone that would never change. Under that tone, everything repeated, and repeated. It was as if his insignificant self in this battle was killing, and killing again. Gradually, that fatigue grew deeper, and people could not help but fall into a daze. Yet the result of falling into a daze was usually death. If they died, they would fall into an eternal slumber. If they lived, then they would receive a forceful stimulation that could bring them a short period of excitement. But that excitement came from draining their lives. After that short period of excitement, they would fall into an even deeper fatigue and a daze. How many people could avoid the moment of life and death brought by their first days in this state of exhaustion? Perhaps they could do it once or twice, but 3 times, 4 times, and countless times. This was a battle where not only were the shamans their enemies, they were also their own enemies. The slaughter continued without end. Blood continuously seeped into the ground, causing the shamans beyond Sky Mist City to flow with rivers of blood. The blood on the ground and the ripples that spilled into the air were like countless pairs of aloof eyes that were watching everything cruelly. Yifeng had already returned to Su Ming's side. This was not out of his own will, but because Su Ming's roar had stirred up the wings of the moon, forcing Yifeng to return. When he returned to Su Ming's side, he occupied the gigantic, ferocious beast's body from before. However, there was only half of its body left, but it was still alive, strangely enough. The battle continued. Su Ming did not know how many shamans he had killed, neither did he know how many wounds he had on his body, Neither did he know how many times his divine general armor had crumbled. In fact, even Han Mountain Bell had been forced back into his body by a large amount of divine abilities, causing injuries to appear on his body. It was especially so for his chest. There was a nearly fatal wound there. That wound had been caused by a long spear charging towards him from the side, when the woman in the black aura, his eldest senior brother, had given him flew out to block another attack for him. This was a battlefield. There were too many unchangeable factors and too many enemies. It was not a one-on-one fight. As the battle continued, Su Ming did not know where he was in the battlefield. He only saw a familiar head flying into the sky after it was cut off by a shaman. Su Ming did not know this person's name, but he had seen him before. He was a disciple of Freezing Sky Clan. The head fell in front of Su Ming. There was confusion on the person's face, but there was also a hint of relief, as if he had finally closed his eyes from his exhaustion. Su Ming looked at the person's head and lifted his right hand swiftly before slamming his palm down behind him. Booming sounds and whistling sounds came from behind him. Those booming sounds came from a shaman who had suddenly appeared behind him and was sent tumbling backwards. Those whistling sounds came from the small Virescent sword chasing after him and piercing through him. Su Ming opened his left hand and a pile of ashes disappeared. It was a stone coin. He had already swallowed a lot of medicine so that he could maintain his combat abilities. He had also spent a large amount of stone coins so that he could continue spreading his divine sense outwards. Not only did it increase his chances of survival, it also allowed the small Virescent sword to maintain its sharpness. In this battlefield, all divine abilities could not compare to the speed and convenience of a clean kill. Su Ming's speed was sometimes fast, sometimes slow. When he attacked, his killing intent would always be present. Once he killed his opponent, he gradually learned not to continue fighting. Instead, he would immediately retreat and head towards another direction. Su Ming. In the midst of this muddle-headed slaughter, Su Ming killed a shaman. His face was pale, and a wound so deep to the bone could be seen on his thigh. At that moment, a surprised voice reached his ears. Su Ming turned around. He was still a little dazed, but even so, when he spread his divine sense outwards, he instinctively protected himself. He saw a man who had cut off a shaman's head and was looking at him. Su Ming had seen this person before. He was a disciple of Freezing Sky Clan. The man's eyes were also bloodshot. He was exhausted. Once he gave Su Ming a nod, he quickly left. This feels like a dream. Su Ming turned his head around and continued moving forward. As he continued killing, he was exhausted. The sounds of battle by his ears seemed to have become an eternal sound that continued echoing in his ears. He saw shamans with different ferocious beasts. He also saw some people wearing masks among the shamans. These people were the same as Su Ming. They moved through the battlefield, and wherever they went, blood would rain down endlessly. All the masked shamans exuded a powerful, murderous aura. Normal berserkers were not their opponents. Su Ming could vaguely see that the berserkers who could fight against these masked people were also masked people. However, the berserkers who wore masks had black masks, which was completely different from the berserkers' white masks. As Su Ming continued killing in a daze, the near-fatal wound on his chest was caused by a long spear thrown by a masked shaman. There was a cross-shaped crack on that person's mask. Once he threw the long spear, he cast a cold glance at Su Ming from the distance before he turned around and left. Su Ming saw all of this, but he was still in a daze due to his fatigue. As the sounds of battle echoed indistinctly in his ears, Su Ming took a step forward and arrived before a young shaman. This was a shaman who still looked like a child. His face was covered in blood, and he was roaring as he charged forward. When Su Ming walked past him and took his head, the young man coughed out blood and took a few more steps forward before he fell. Su Ming walked past him numbly and arrived beside another male shaman. When he walked past him, the man's head was in Su Ming's hands, but the moment his head was separated from his body, he chose to self-destruct. The booming sounds and the impact that stirred up caused blood to flow out of Su Ming's mouth, but he did not stop. He continued walking forward. As he walked forward, Su Ming's divine general armor seemed to have been infected by his fatigue after being destroyed and reconstructed multiple times. Its recovery speed started slowing down. His Han Mountain Bell was also struck by the scattered divine abilities that were not aimed at Su Ming in the battlefield filled with countless people, causing bell chimes to ring from Su Ming's body. He Feng was also nowhere to be found. He was scattered by the crowd, and since he had the body of a ferocious beast, it was inevitable that he would be misunderstood by the berserkers who had gone berserk. If this continued, then perhaps Su Ming would survive the battle, but there was a higher possibility that he would walk towards death in his dazed state. Right before Su Ming's eyes, he saw an incredibly familiar face among the dozen-something berserkers who were surrounded and attacked by a group of shamans in the distance. That face was dyed in blood, and at that moment, there was a resolute look on his face as he continued fighting madly. That person's appearance caused Su Ming's dazed state to freeze for a moment. With his own eyes, he saw the shaman who was fighting against this person coughing out a mouthful of black blood at the price of his own life. Even though he was heavily injured, towards the person Su Ming knew. That blood clearly contained a destructive power. If anyone was hit by that blood, it would definitely pierce through their face and skull. Su Ming's pupils shrank. At that instant, he woke up from his dazed state, as if he had just woken up from a dream. The sounds of battle in his ears immediately became clear from their muddled state. The world before his eyes also became complete in an instant. Ziche, Su Ming mumbled. Without a hint of hesitation, the moment he woke up, he took a huge step forward. With that one step, the sounds of battle disappeared from his ears and were replaced by a piercing sound of something slicing through the air. With an indescribable speed, he suddenly rushed out. He was so quick that before the shaman's blood landed on Ziche's face, Su Ming had already traveled several thousands of feet and appeared before Ziche. The violent gust of wind he stirred up almost instantly swept away the black blood and made it disappear. As for the heavily injured shaman, he did not even have the time to check what had happened before he felt as if a wall had crashed into his face. His body tumbled backwards, and his body crumbled due to the powerful gust of wind. "Uncle Master!" Ziche's voice traveled into Su Ming's ears. He staggered. The continuous battles and the repeated use of that extreme speed had caused Su Ming's mind to become exhausted. His body had also reached its limit, but he still took a step forward and swiftly attacked with that extreme speed. With Su Ming's help, the dozen-something berserkers who were surrounded by the shamans fought back with all their might. They fought as they retreated, and after a moment, when a large number of the shamans had died, they broke free from the encirclement. By then, Su Ming had already coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. As he staggered, Ziche caught him. The other berserkers were all injured. In their exhaustion, they quickly surrounded Ziche and Su Ming to protect them. They looked around warily and retreated. Ziche's voice sounded very far away in Su Ming's ears. Su Ming looked at the anxious Ziche and closed his eyes. When he opened them the next instant, he nodded his head. "Ziche, he's your uncle, Master. He's so fast, especially the wind he stirred up when he moved. It's like a divine ability. Ziche, what's your uncle Master's name?" The berserkers who were protecting Ziche and Su Ming as they retreated asked one after another. "My name is Su Ming." Su Ming took a deep breath. He no longer needed Ziche's support. Once he brought out some medicine and swallowed it, he retreated with the dozen-something people. "We don't even know whether we'll be able to survive in this battlefield, so let's not bother with seniority. Brother Su, there's something off with you. Are you a shaman hunter who fought alone?" The dozen-something berserkers were very orderly as they retreated. The 8 people at the periphery did not split their attention at all. As they retreated, they fought against the shamans who closed in on them. Then, they would quickly switch places with their companions behind them and rest for a while. There's one more chapter later, and I'll make up for yesterday's 5th chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 360. Oh well, don't go look for your team. Just stay with us. Or else if you're alone in this gigantic battlefield, you'll be in a constant state of absent-mindedness. A middle-aged man who was also drenched in blood moved back from the periphery and panted harshly as he spoke to Su Ming. This person had extraordinary power and had already reached the bone sacrifice realm. "Uncle Master, he's Yin Bo, the leader of our team," Ziche quickly explained. Ziche quickly explained by the side. Once he saw Su Ming, he naturally reverted to his usual self and followed behind him, looking around warily. "I can tell that you have extraordinary power, and your speed is even more shocking. How about this? You can rest inside first. We'll take turns outside. Once you've recovered a little, you can join us." The middle-aged man spoke quickly. Once he finished speaking, he moved and switched places with the 8 people outside once again, causing the dozen-something people in the team to continue fighting as they continued retreating. Su Ming took a deep breath. He was no longer in a daze. Everything that had happened just now was like a dream when he thought back to it. From the middle-aged man's words and the changes in the positions of his team members, Su Ming found the reason behind his absent-mindedness. "I've rested enough." A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. When the 8 people outside retreated and switched places once again, he took a step forward and stood at the periphery. This isn't a single person's fight. Su Ming stood at the periphery of the team. He understood the reason for his current state. Fatigue was a part of it, and the repeated killings were also a part of it. But more importantly, he did not have his own team. He was alone, and he was continuously fighting on the battlefield. No matter how strong a person's will was, if they continued like this, they would break down sooner or later, unless they were those who had gone through the trials of war and had tempered themselves. This sort of person would be valued by those in the bone sacrifice realm, even if they were just in the transcendence realm. If they were in the bone sacrifice realm, then they would definitely be valued by those in the berserker soul realm, because this sort of person was a warrior. Only they could break through their limits in this war, and at the same time their level of cultivation increased, they could also bring forth their strongest power. Their willpower was so strong that even if the sky fell and the earth was destroyed, it would not be destroyed in the slightest. No matter how dangerous a crisis they ran into, their willpower would not break down. Perhaps this was what the shaman tribe and berserker tribe needed to train up such a person. "My willpower is still not strong enough." A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he sucked in a deep breath of the unique atmosphere in the battlefield. He was no longer absent-minded, but instead started fighting against the incoming shamans once again at the periphery of the team. This time, he was not fighting alone. He had Ziche by his side, as well as his companions who had protected him when he was tired just now. Under his careful observation, Su Ming saw that there was an endless number of such teams on the battlefield. As for the shamans, while there might seem to be quite a large number of them fighting alone, Su Ming gradually realized that there were also teams like this among them. Those who ventured out alone were usually those with strong wills, and they used this to train themselves. Su Ming understood now. What war trains is one's willpower. Willpower is formless, but it can be used to refine people into experts. This is a path to becoming an expert. Understanding appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As he attacked, green light shone, and the incoming shaman immediately chose to retreat. "I have too few divine abilities, and I'm using my enchanted treasures incorrectly." Calmness appeared in Su Ming's left eye once again, and it formed a stark contrast with the blood-red madness in his right eye. Without any hesitation, he struck his chest with his left hand, and Han Mountain Bell instantly manifested around him. It floated in midair and let out bell chimes. As the bell chimes spread out, Su Ming formed a seal with his right hand and pointed at the bell. Immediately, Han Mountain Bell grew larger and crashed down on the ground before him. The ground nearby trembled, and when Han Mountain Bell was lifted up, the ground was already a bloody mess. Defense is important, but offense is even more important. If I have enough defense, then I'll definitely lack the will that won't perish when I go through life and death. Su Ming felt as if a bolt of lightning had sliced through his head. He spread his arms wide, and a large amount of lightning suddenly swam through his body, turning into 4 balls of lightning around him. Bolts of lightning shot out from the air, causing the place where he stood to be filled with thunderous booms. The 4 balls of lightning shot out with a howl and fell into the incoming shamans, causing booming sounds to reverberate in the air. I was wrong. Even if this is a war, it's also a great chance for me to train my divine abilities. Su Ming patted the storage bag in his bosom with his right hand and brought out a beast's skin. Once he unfurled it, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Immediately, the beast's skin turned into a red glow and disappeared. Soon after, a red meadow appeared under Su Ming's feet. The instant the meadow appeared, it immediately started absorbing the blood on the ground madly. It moved with Su Ming, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. As it absorbed the blood, the area of the meadow expanded, and as it continued absorbing and expanding, Su Ming could clearly feel waves of cold air coming from under his feet. Once that cold air swam through his body, it seemed to make his fatigue lessen by a large margin. The meadow was only effective for him alone. The other berserkers beside him were completely useless. Once Su Ming noticed this, he immediately controlled the meadow's expansion so that it only existed under his feet and did not spread out further. Han Mountain Bell crashed down with a loud bang. The balls of lightning continued exploding, and a small sword whistled through the air, causing Su Ming's group to retreat at a shocking speed. Wherever they went, most of the invading shamans would retreat. If that was all, perhaps the slightly more powerful shamans would not have been able to avoid all of them. However, as Han Mountain Bell continued crashing down and piercing screeches came from within, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He formed a seal and pointed forward. A ray of black light flew out from Han Mountain Bell, and the area around Su Ming's team turned into a land of death. What was even more shocking was that once the black light appeared, the ferocious beasts of the shaman tribe started wailing when they got close to them. It was as if they did not dare to come closer and were retreating desperately, as if there was something terrifying in this place. Ziche was still fine, but the team members beside him, including the team leader in the initial stage of the bone sacrifice realm, Yin Bo, also sucked in a sharp breath. They would occasionally look at Su Ming strangely. "Brother Su, I understand why you're fighting alone in this battlefield. Even if you're not a shaman hunter, you'll definitely become one of them soon." Yin Bo wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming. All the people around him looked at Su Ming with respect. Ziche immediately explained softly beside Su Ming. There is a small group of people who were not in the Berserker Soul realm during the war between the Berserker tribe and the Shaman tribe, but their divine abilities had clearly surpassed their respective realms. It was as if they had gone through hundreds of battles without dying. These people were known as hunters. If they were from the Berserker tribe, then they were shaman hunters. If they were from a shaman tribe, then they were berserker hunters. They would not hide their identities on the battlefield because they needed experience. That was why they would wear masks. The masks of the berserker tribe were black, and the masks of the shaman tribe were white. If they were given a mask, then it meant that the person was acknowledged and became a hunter. The masks from both sides were worth a large amount of war points. It was also the only way for non-hunters to become hunters. If they killed a shaman hunter, took off his mask, and handed it over to Sky Mist City, then that person would become a hunter. Very few people would resort to trickery, because once they became a hunter and wore a mask, they would face even more deaths. If they resorted to trickery, then it would be very easy for others to take their lives. As Su Ming listened to Ziche's explanation, he nodded his head. He had made some guesses about this before. These people were definitely people with incredibly strong willpower. Su Ming knew that he was not one of them, because his willpower had fallen into a fatal daze and his mind was exhausted during the 1-versus-1 battle just now. "Brother Su, with your help, why don't we stop retreating? We'll fight our way in and try to get more war points. Of course, you could take a third of the war points. We'll split the rest." Yin Bo licked his lips, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. He looked at the shamans and spoke to Su Ming in a low voice. "All right." Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he nodded his head. Once he made his decision, the other teams also agreed to it. They immediately stopped retreating, but under Yin Bo's orders, they instantly changed their positions and took the shape of an arrow. With Su Ming in the lead, Ziche and Yin Bo by his side, and the others behind him, they charged forward. As they charged forward, the small virescent sword surrounded them. Han Mountain Bell, chimes reverberated in the air, the strange black lights swam about with a whistle, and lightning crackled in the air. Wherever the arrow-shaped team went, blood would rain down, and they charged straight into the huge battle in the distance. Time trickled by. The team with Su Ming in the lead was killing incredibly quickly, but they also suffered quite a number of casualties. By then, there were only 9 people left. However, the amount of war points they obtained was incredibly high. The sky gradually turned dark. The booming sounds in the green fog became more frequent. As Su Ming moved forward, he came to an abrupt halt. That one halt caused the 8 people behind him to stop at the same time. In the crowd in the distance was a male shaman wearing a white mask. He was dressed entirely in black, and he was looking at them coldly. There was a cross-shaped crack on his mask. This person was different from the other shamans. He was a berserker hunter who moved alone in the shaman tribe. This sort of person would only dare to do this if they had incredibly strong willpower. Almost the moment he looked towards Su Ming's team that had attracted the attention of the shamans nearby, fighting spirit appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Yin Bo, change your position. Ziche, work with me. The two of you lead the team and defend this place for a while. As Su Ming spoke, he charged forward and leapt into the air, charging towards the berserker hunter who was fighting alone. A berserker hunter. He's wearing a mask. He's a berserker hunter. Yin Bo's pupils shrank. He looked in the direction Su Ming was charging towards and saw the masked shaman went against this person and take off his mask. Ziche, your uncle master will become a berserker. Yin Bo's breathing quickened and anticipation appeared in his eyes. I'm sending the 3rd chapter here. 7 chapters every 2 days. I'm begging for monthly votes. I'm begging for recommendations. Only then will there be excitement in my ears. I need this motivation. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 361. Before the end of the month, there will be more explosions. There will be more explosions. Yesterday and today, there were a total of 7 chapters. Begging for monthly votes. Begging for monthly votes. Begging for monthly votes. Begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 362. As Su Ming continued fighting in the battlefield, he sensed his own insignificance, but at the same time, he also found a path that would make him stronger in this brutal war. Willpower. He would use the blood of the battlefield to refine his own willpower as a powerful warrior. That willpower would not be destroyed no matter how many disasters he went through. Even if time changed and the world changed, it would still be like an inextinguishable flame that would burn everything in the world that tried to stop him. Not only will I survive this war, I will also gain experience from it. A rarely seen fighting spirit appeared in Su Ming's eyes. That fighting spirit was like fire that ignited Su Ming's life. He increased his speed and charged out from Ziche and Yin Bo towards the berserker hunter from the shaman tribe who was looking at him from a distance. That mask, that white color, and the cross-shaped crack on it allowed Su Ming to recognize him with just one glance. This person was the one who had stabbed him in the chest with a long spear and had nearly injured him badly. Willpower is an illusory word. It's like the tenacity of a person's personality, like a ray of light in a person's life, but it's still illusory. Su Ming held the small virescent sword in his right hand. The sword glare from that sword was nearly 10 feet long. As Su Ming charged forward, all the shamans who tried to block his way let out screams of pain and quickly retreated, because they had noticed that the person Su Ming wanted to fight was a hunter of a shaman tribe. The murderous aura coming from Su Ming's body was also clearly not something ordinary. This was a hunter's battle. Most people would not interfere. The masked man from the shaman tribe was staring at Su Ming coldly. As Su Ming continued closing in on him, he did not move. However, even though he did not move, he was like a huge mountain, giving off a false impression that even if the sky fell and the earth cracked, he would not be crushed. In this war, I must first have my own principle. This principle is illusory, but as I continue refining it in this war, then one day, this principle will turn into my willpower. When that day comes, I will bring this principle with me from this battlefield, and it will become my existence for the rest of my life. Su Ming took a step forward, and the sound of air being sliced apart sliced through the air. Lightning flashed before him and turned into 8 balls of lightning. Han Mountain Bell floated in midair and moved forward with him. The black lines in the area also flashed, causing a large number of ferocious beasts to retreat in fear. My principles. In a flash, Su Ming was less than 3,000 feet away from the masked shaman. He did not use his full speed, but it was still shocking. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I'll definitely kill them. On the battlefield, be it active or passive, as long as someone attacks me, then unless that person is killed, I must kill that person. This is my principle, and one day it will become my will. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. The instant he was less than 2,000 feet away from the masked shaman, his speed increased exponentially, reaching the limit he could reach. Under that extreme speed, Su Ming's body seemed to freeze for a moment. Yet what caused that pause was his afterimage. Almost the instant Su Ming's speed increased exponentially, the pupils of the masked shaman, who was originally watching him coldly 1,000-something feet away, shrank. Without a hint of hesitation, he immediately took a few steps back. He was not fast, but with each step he took, the ground seemed to tremble. At the same time, he lifted his right hand and formed his fingers into the shape of a claw before he swiped at the air before him. The moment he swiped at the air, the tattoo under the masked shaman's mask shone with a dark light, and with his body as the center, the air around him immediately started distorting, turning into a large amount of ripples that were rapidly spreading out. The ripples that were spreading out suddenly bounced back from a spot by his side. The instant Su Ming took a step forward, the masked shaman smiled coldly and moved swiftly. His right leg moved as his body turned, bringing with it a piercing sound as it sliced through the air. He used the momentum of turning around to sweep his leg horizontally towards Su Ming like a whip. Booming sounds reverberated between the two of them. This was the first time someone discovered Su Ming's existence and launched a counterattack while he was traveling at such extreme speed. The power of the male shaman's leg first crashed into the ball of lightning before Su Ming, and as it rumbled, it also crashed into Su Ming's small virescent sword. Yet the moment it crashed into the small sword, Su Ming's vision blurred. He could no longer see the male shaman's leg coming at him. What appeared before his eyes was the tail of a ferocious beast charging at him. He could not tell what sort of ferocious beast that tail belonged to, even if he knew that it was an illusion and was formed by the shaman's divine ability. The great power that came from it immediately struck the small virescent sword, and after a brief pause, it struck Su Ming's body. Su Ming felt as if a huge mountain had crashed into his body from midair. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and immediately tumbled backwards. He retreated nearly 1,000 feet before he landed on the ground. He staggered a few more steps back before he managed to regain his footing. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth once again. The male shaman glared at Su Ming coldly and took a step forward. A powerful, murderous aura spread out from his body. That murderous aura seemed to have gained physical form during dusk, turning into a large, ghastly presence. At the same time it enveloped the area, there seemed to be an endless amount of vengeful spirits howling around the male shaman's body. Most of these vengeful spirits were berserkers. Most of them had shattered bodies and were wailing shrilly. In fact, Su Ming even saw 5 hunters from the berserker tribe wearing masks among them. Su Ming's understanding towards the shaman tribe might not be great, but it was not little either. He had come into contact with them a few times, and he had seen many spirit mediums among them. At that moment, he could tell with just one glance that the vengeful spirits around the male shaman's body were definitely not formed by spirit mediums. These vengeful spirits had been trapped by the man's murderous aura for all eternity. They could not leave and could only wail in pain for an endless amount of time. Only when a man died could they leave. Battle Shaman. Su Ming wiped away the blood at the corners of his mouth. Sharp pain was still coming from his body. The power of the male shaman's kick just now had made Su Ming sense a terrifying physical strength. This sort of power, this sort of murderous aura, this sort of method that was not used by spirit mediums to trap vengeful spirits was something only battle shamans could possess once they reached a certain level. The male shaman only used 4 steps to arrive before Su Ming. With the mask on his face, only the aloof look in his eyes could be seen. The expression on his face could not be seen. The instant he closed in, the male shaman lifted his fist and hurled it towards Su Ming in the most direct manner possible. This was not the first time Su Ming ran into a battle shaman. The shaman tribe had the most battle shamans in this battlefield, and Su Ming had killed quite a number of them. However, this was the first time he ran into a powerful battle shaman. This seemingly normal battle shaman, who was one of the shaman tribes with the highest number of battle shamans, made Su Ming feel an incredibly great pressure. It was especially so when he threw that punch at him. Su Ming could vaguely see the male shaman turning into a gigantic, ferocious beast, and that beast's entire body was charging towards him. Su Ming did not retreat. He had just set down his own principle, and he wanted to turn that principle into his willpower. If he could not win against this man, then forget about refining his willpower. He might not even be able to survive in this battlefield. Almost the instant the masked male shaman hurled his fist towards him, the divine general armor immediately manifested on Su Ming's body. However, the instant it appeared, it was immediately disintegrated by the powerful pressure coming from the male shaman's body. It was as if it could not even exist under that pressure. Before me, the chi in your body doesn't even dare to manifest your Berserker tribe's divine general armor. What sort of divine general are you? This was the first time the male shaman spoke. The moment he did so, his fist landed before Su Ming, and with a jolt in the air, Su Ming was forced back once again. However, even though he was forced back, it did not mean that he did not retaliate. The male shaman had scattered his fist through the air and did not land it on Su Ming's body was precisely because Su Ming's counterattack came from Han Mountain Bell, which was crashing down on the male shaman's head. That bell whistled through the air and charged towards the male shaman. He lifted his head swiftly, but did not dodge. Instead, he shot up from the ground and charged towards Han Mountain Bell, hurling his fist forward. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. Han Mountain Bell tumbled backwards due to the punch, but it was not damaged in the slightest. As for the male shaman, he was sent crashing to the ground by the rebound, and blood flowed out from under his mask. As Su Ming retreated, he immediately lifted his head and charged towards the male shaman. The balls of lightning whistled before him, and the sword light charged forward. Yet the moment the balls of lightning and the sword light closed in on the male shaman who was falling to the ground, the male shaman opened his mouth and let out a loud roar. His roar shook the sky and contained a strange power. That power was like the furious roar of a ferocious beast, as if it was a form of oppression that came from a higher level of life. It was like a mortal running into a tiger, and his legs would turn to jelly when the tiger roared. It was like a child running into a wolf and feeling fear when a dog barked. Voices, especially the voices of ferocious beasts, could often intimidate others in a way that was not something that could be controlled even if one wanted to. The male shaman's roar was like that. It made Su Ming's heart tremble. His divine sense became a little chaotic, and the light from the small sword instantly dimmed. Even the balls of lightning shrank rapidly. This was the shaman art that belonged to powerful battle shamans under the unique training method of a shaman tribe's battle shamans. I have some personal matters to deal with at home. I'll probably update it around 7. If I can update it earlier, I'll try my best. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 363. Just as Su Ming's balls of lightning and small virescent sword were reduced by the masked shaman art that looked like a ferocious beast and contained the battle shaman's unique spell, the male shaman finally recovered from the chi raging in his body after fighting against Han Mountain Bell. At that moment, he charged forward and crashed into the balls of lightning. The balls of lightning were destroyed, and when they crashed into the small virescent sword, the dull sword was immediately sent flying away. The male shaman seemed to have turned into a violent gust of wind that charged towards Su Ming. The instant he closed in, he clenched his fist once again and hurled a punch forward. Su Ming immediately retreated and used his speed to dodge the incoming punch. When he did so, he lifted his right hand and pointed 3 of his fingers at the sky before he drew a line downwards. Execution of 3 evils. This was the dark mountain art that Su Ming had never used ever since he came to the land of South Morning. This was the first time he executed it in this battlefield. As the level of cultivation of a person increased, the might of the execution of 3 evils would also be different. At that moment, the moment the execution of 3 evils of heaven, earth, and man was executed, most of the vengeful spirits bound by the murderous aura around the man dissipated with shrill screams. At the same time, the male shaman shuddered, but he managed to withstand it. He turned around and swung his right arm. A piercing whistle that sliced through the air reverberated in the air as he charged towards Su Ming. Su Ming retreated once again, using his extreme speed to avoid the attack. Once he appeared in another direction, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Once that blood appeared, it instantly started burning and turned into a sea of fire that enveloped the man. Yet the moment the sea of fire enveloped him, a gigantic fist shot out from within and rammed straight towards Su Ming's chest. Su Ming activated his extreme speed once again and managed to avoid it. I like to see just how many times you can use this speed. The male shaman in the sea of fire laughed coldly and spun around, stirring up a violent gust of wind that extinguished the flames around him. He then walked towards Su Ming. The male shaman did not have a lot of divine abilities, but his physical body was simply too strong, causing Su Ming to have to dodge, or else once his attacks landed on his body, he would have a hard time withstanding them. As he retreated, Han Mountain Bell crashed down on the male shaman in midair once again. A hint of madness appeared in the male shaman's eyes under the mask. Even though he knew of Han Mountain Bell's might, he still did not dodge. As he walked towards Su Ming, Han Mountain Bell crashed down with a bang and crashed into his body. However, in the midst of the booming sounds, the man's body only paused for a moment before he lifted his foot and continued walking forward. Su Ming's expression changed. With his mind, he lifted Han Mountain Bell once again, but at that moment, the male shaman suddenly let out that beast roar filled with a strange power once again. Under that roar, Su Ming's heart trembled and he could not control his emotions, causing the momentum of Han Mountain Bell crashing down to slow down. At the same time, the male shaman closed in on Su Ming and hurled his fist at him. Damn it! Su Ming could not control his mind. That beast roar was too strange. It was like a mighty pressure coming from a life form. It was like a roar from a mortal enemy, and it could make anyone's heart tremble. Su Ming was just about to activate his speed to avoid the punch when the male shaman increased his speed abruptly. Once his fist landed, it did not land before Su Ming but on the other side. However, once the punch landed, it stirred up a large amount of ripples and distortions in the air, causing Su Ming's speed to instantly slow down. At the same time, the male shaman used the chance to charge towards Su Ming. The instant he closed in on Su Ming could not dodge in time, and he could even hear the male shaman's ferocious laughter. The man did not use his fists or legs, but instead used his head. Once he closed in on Su Ming, he rammed his head against Su Ming's forehead. With a bang, Su Ming's vision turned chaotic. A nauseating feeling instantly rose within him, and a booming sound rang out in his head. As his body tumbled backwards, the male shaman licked his lips under the mask and rushed forward. This time, killing intent appeared in his eyes. He turned his right hand into a claw and swiped at Su Ming's chest. He wanted to rip out Su Ming's heart. Blood trickled down from Su Ming's forehead. That blood flowed into his eyes, making it seem as if the entire world had turned red. He could not see the male shaman's attack clearly, but he could feel a wave of killing intent charging towards him. In that moment of danger, Su Ming let out a low growl. As he retreated, Han Mountain Bell immediately shrank and charged towards him. Once it closed in on him, it fused into his body. The instant the male shaman's claw closed in on him, Han Mountain Bell was released to protect him. A loud bang rang in the air, and bell chimes reverberated in the air. Su Ming staggered backwards. The numbness brought by the bell chimes traveled through his body, but before he could retreat too far, the male shaman closed in on him once again and continued ramming his fist into him. You're a berserker child who only knows how to dodge and be protected. You're not fit to be a warrior and act as you please in this battlefield. The male shaman's voice rang out, and disdain appeared in his eyes. He might not have been able to injure Su Ming physically, but the bell chimes reverberating in the air and the chaos caused by the impact on Su Ming's head caused blood to continuously flow out of Su Ming's mouth. Once the male shaman threw out a few punches, he froze and spun around before kicking Han Mountain Bell. The moment he did so, it was as if the tail of a ferocious beast had lashed out. Once it landed on Han Mountain Bell, it stirred up a boom that far surpassed all the previous booms. In the midst of that boom, Su Ming coughed out a huge mouthful of blood in Han Mountain Bell. His body tumbled backwards and was sent flying several thousands of feet away before he landed on the ground with a bang. When he landed on the ground, Han Mountain Bell shrank back in his body, causing Su Ming to no longer have any form of protection besides the black bracelet on his wrist. His eldest senior brother had given this female slave to him. When Su Ming was fighting against the male shaman, he had been preventing her from appearing. Once she appeared and they worked together, it would not be too difficult for him to kill the male shaman. However, even if Su Ming managed to obtain the mask, it would not completely belong to him. With this sort of mask, even if he became a hunter, unless he relied on someone else forever, then once he lost the female slave, what awaited him would still be the weakness of not having been refined. His eldest senior brother had only given him the bracelet to protect Su Ming's life during times of danger, not to make him rely on it. This was something Su Ming understood. Blood trickled down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. His eyes were slightly unfocused, but his injuries were not that serious. After all, he was in Han Mountain Bell. He had only become numb. His true injury was his mind. The trembling of his mind when the male shaman roared was something Su Ming could not control. He had never expected that he would be so weak. Am I afraid? Su Ming's vision became clouded. He could not see the male shaman walking towards him from thousands of feet away. He could not see the black bracelet on his wrist turning into wisps of smoke that could shoot out at any moment. But what am I afraid of? Anguish appeared on Su Ming's face. This battle had made him seem to have grown a lot in an instant. Yes, I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid that once I die, I won't be able to find my home. I'm afraid that once I die, all the mysteries will disappear. I'm afraid that once I die, I won't be able to open my eyes. Su Ming's vision became increasingly clouded. His consciousness started fading away. Due to the strangeness of the beast's roar, his mind felt as if it had been forcefully suppressed. This was something he did not want, but it was difficult for him to control. What should I do? Su Ming mumbled. In his daze, all the sounds in his ears disappeared. The scene before his eyes was that of the sky filled with tumbling green fog. Gradually, the green fog disappeared. What replaced it was a night of wind and snow. In a quiet village, there was a house with candlelight shining through. The elder held a large bamboo slip in his hands. He sat by the side and rested his chin on his palms. Dark Mountain Tribe's ancestor did not have a smooth journey. He went through a lot of hardships before he managed to form the great Dark Mountain Tribe. Let's not talk about the division of Dark Mountain Tribe. Let's talk about our ancestor alone. He went through a lot of hardships and left behind many legends. His descendants carved them on bamboo slips to encourage their descendants. These are all things you need to remember. Now, let me test you. Dark Mountain Tribe's ancestor came to Dark Mountain alone. Who did he fight against? He ran into a mountain spirit beast. Our ancestor wanted to build a tribe here, but he was not allowed to. That's why he fought. Su Ming rested his chin on his palms and yawned lazily. Go on. The elders smiled faintly. What else is there to say? We just encountered a huge beast, and we fought halfway up the mountain. That beast seemed very powerful, and the aura it exhaled could make people involuntarily feel fear. On the cliff halfway up the mountain, the ancestor had a difficult battle with that beast, and in the end he won. Oh, what did you see from this rumor? The elder asked with a smile. Only the brave will emerge victorious. Elder, you've said this a few times before. I know. All right, I'll take it that you know. Perhaps one day in the future, you'll truly understand the meaning behind these words and understand how our ancestor felt at that time. As he lay on the battlefield in the land of the shamans outside Sky Mist City, Su Ming felt as if he had returned to that snowy night many years ago. The scene at that time echoed in his ears, and the instant the words "the brave will win when two enemies meet in a narrow path" echoed in his mind, Su Ming's body started trembling furiously. His unfocused eyes suddenly lit up brightly. Only the brave will emerge victorious. Su Ming mumbled. The sounds of battle that he could no longer hear suddenly became clear. The masked shaman was charging towards him 1,000 feet away. The murderous aura exuding from his entire body turned into a powerful pressure, causing all those who tried to block his path, be it berserkers or shamans, to retreat and avoid him. The bracelet on Su Ming's wrist that had turned into wisps of smoke was just about to shoot out when Su Ming immediately grabbed it with his left hand. I'll do it myself. With a calm expression, Su Ming stood up from the ground. I beg for Qijian website's recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qijian website and vote for us. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 364. When Su Ming stood up once again, his long hair danced in the air. There were still bloodstains on his hair, and as his hair danced in the air, a few drops of blood were blown away by the wind. When we meet on a narrow path, only the brave will win, Su Ming mumbled. His eyes sparkled brilliantly as he looked at the male shaman walking towards him from 1,000 feet away. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath of the air in the battlefield, and it was as if he went through an indescribable metamorphosis. He charged forward and charged towards the male shaman, bringing with him a monstrous killing intent and a presence that would not allow him to retreat as he closed in on him with a howl. A cold sneer appeared on the male shaman's face under the mask. There was a hint of disdain contained within the aloof look in his eyes. He looked down on this berserker. This person only knew how to dodge and only knew how to protect himself. This sort of person did not deserve to be called a warrior in his eyes. Even if Su Ming's arrival had made him feel that there was something different about him, he still remained as disdainful as ever. The distance between the two of them continued shrinking, and in the blink of an eye, there was less than 300 feet between them. Wherever they went, the other shamans and berserkers who were fighting would avoid them. This was a corner of a large battlefield, but the battle between Su Ming and the masked shaman in that corner was one of the more prestigious battles among the countless shamans and berserkers in the battlefield. This was a battle between hunters. If the male shaman won, then there would be one more berserker among the berserkers he hunted. If Su Ming won, then he would end the male shaman's existence as a hunter and replace him as the berserker hunter. This sort of battle had practically attracted the attention of all the shamans and berserkers in the area. It had even caused some of the hunters from the shaman and berserker tribes in the distance to look over. Even if it did not matter whether Su Ming won or the male shaman won, It would not affect the outcome of this battle. But to Su Ming, this was his battle. He wanted to win against his own fear and his own mind in this place. From this place, he would go through a glorious metamorphosis and create a will that would allow him to become a powerful berserker. I must win this battle. I must win. Determination appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He was not overestimating himself, but in truth his combat abilities were about the same as the male shaman's. If it was not because of the man's strange shaman roar, Su Ming would not have been in such a pathetic state. At this moment, he had found a way to fight against that strange voice. And that method was the courageous one would win. Kill! Su Ming let out a loud roar and leaped up from the ground, charging straight towards the incoming male shaman. The two of them crashed into each other in midair like two arrows that had been shot from the ground. With a loud bang, Su Ming trembled and staggered a few steps back. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, but he did not hesitate. He rushed out once again and crashed into the male shaman once again. Boom, 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 boom. In the short span of a few breaths, the two of them had already attacked each other more than a dozen times. The derision on the male shaman's face was no longer there, but had turned into a grave expression. He could already tell that Su Ming was different from before. At that moment, Su Ming was very different from before. He no longer dodged, no longer tried to use his divine abilities, no longer only defending and protecting himself. At that moment, there was a boldness about Su Ming that made the male shaman apprehensive. That feeling made him feel as if he was not facing a body of flesh and blood, but a mountain, a gigantic mountain that stood tall on the ground and would never crumble. This did not mean that Su Ming's power and physical body had become stronger after he stood up once again. It was just that his gaze, his actions, his footsteps, and his expression had all turned into a presence, and the source of that presence was Su Ming's invisible will. It was as if there was a power supporting him, not allowing him to choose to retreat. It was making him rather fight to the death than take even half a step back. That will was that presence, and it could be sensed by others. It was especially so for the male shaman who was fighting against him. He could sense it clearly. What is courage? Su Ming, answer me. Su Ming hurled his fist forward. With determination in his eyes, his memories returned to a certain part of his life in Dark Mountain. Courage means not being afraid when you run into wild beasts. At that time, Su Ming was still a young La Su. He had used his youthful voice to answer the question. This is a form of courage, but let me tell you, true courage is when you run into a powerful berserker. When you can't retreat, you will rush out and fight to the death. Similarly, when you face 10 powerful berserkers, you will still do the same. When you face 100 or even more powerful berserkers, you will still do the same. Think about it, Su Ming. If one day I become old and can no longer move, and you want to protect me, you will stand before me, but there will be an endless amount of powerful enemies before you. Close your eyes and think about this feeling. If you choose to stay, then you will know what is courage. This is what I believe is courage. Will I die? If I stay, perhaps I will, perhaps I won't. But if I leave, perhaps I will, perhaps I won't. Then I will choose to stay. Courage is a form of presence. This is not recklessness and impulsiveness, but a presence that is like a mountain, one that will make your enemy's mind crumble because of your tenacity. Courage is also a method to subdue your enemy. It is also a quality that you must have when you walk the world and become an upright man. Su Ming, remember what I told you. Perhaps one day, you will truly understand. Su Ming's fist crashed against the male shaman's right fist. Sharp pain spread through his body, and he even felt as if his bones were about to shatter, but not a hint of retreat could be seen on Su Ming's face. Instead, he charged forward and once again engaged in battle with the male shaman who did not retreat. The more the male shaman fought, the more shocked he became. Based on his previous judgment, he had already reached his limit in this sort of battle. Su Ming should be the same as many of the people he had met before. His mind would first crumble, and it would then spread to his body. Under his frenzied attacks, his entire body and mind would have the thought of retreating. If that was the case, then he would definitely win this battle. This was the training of a powerful battle shaman. Charge forward with an indomitable will. Defeat the fear in your heart. Crush your enemy's will. Destroy the minds of those who stand in your way. And make your enemy walk towards Su Ming as his mind crumbled. Courage, not rashness, Su Ming mumbled. Su Ming mumbled. As he moved forward, he turned around and imitated the male shaman's actions. With a sweep of his leg, he charged towards the male shaman. The male shaman also moved and launched a kick towards Su Ming. Booming sounds shook the sky and earth. This devastating battle attracted the attention of almost all the people in the small area of the gigantic battlefield. It did not matter whether they were shamans or berserkers. All of them saw the blood coughing out by Su Ming and a masked man. The difference was that one of them had blood flowing out from the fog in front of him, and the other had blood flowing down the edge of his mask. Su Ming staggered and fell to the ground due to the impact. At the same time he shuddered, for the first time ever, the male shaman took a few steps back. When he looked at Su Ming, shock appeared in his eyes. Su Ming was still the same Su Ming. His level of cultivation was still the same, his power was still the same, and everything about him was different. The only difference was that, at that moment, there was a tenacious presence around him. He had to win. He had to win. There was no need for him to say anything. From Su Ming's determined gaze, from the presence he exuded, and from the way he charged forward once again, all those who looked towards him could clearly feel Su Ming's fighting spirit and his determination to win. "Fight," Su Ming said calmly. His voice was not loud, but when he said those words with that expression on his face, it was as if Su Ming had turned into a gigantic, ferocious beast. That ferocious beast lifted its head and roared towards the sky, letting out a shocking presence. The male shaman gritted his teeth, and a bloodshot look appeared in his eyes. With a low growl, he charged forward, and the instant he closed in on Su Ming, a glint appeared in his bloodshot eyes, and he let out a roar. That roar was the strange roar that had caused Su Ming's heart to tremble several times and caused him to feel fear in his heart that he could not control. Almost the instant that roar rang out, Su Ming's heart also trembled. However, this time, even though a powerful wave of fear rose uncontrollably in his heart, he did not retreat. He lifted his fist and did not stop for even a single moment. Like an arrow that pierced through fear, he landed before the male shaman the moment he let out that roar, and with his actions, he launched a powerful counterattack. That was Su Ming's punch. One punch. One punch. He did not know how many punches he had thrown. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and for the first time, the masked male shaman was continuously forced back by Su Ming. He was forced back one step, then another, and as he continued retreating, his willpower, his confidence, and his determination as a battle shaman were weakening time and time again. In his eyes, Su Ming had already turned into a real mountain, a tall mountain that he could not cross and could not destroy. When you win against your fear, when you get a taste of bravery, how do you feel? I hope that at that time, I'll still be by your side and listen to your feelings. The elder's kind smile seemed to appear before Su Ming's eyes. As he faced that strange roar, he hurled out punch after punch, and Su Ming found the feeling the elder spoke of. It was the feeling of winning against myself. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he opened them, he spread his arms wide and no longer chased after the male shaman. Instead, he spread his divine sense outwards, and the small virescent sword charged forward. A large amount of balls of lightning gathered together and filled the area. Han Mountain Bell also manifested and charged towards the male shaman. The instant all these divine abilities appeared, they all fell on the male shaman, who had a large amount of blood seeping out of his mask. His eyes were unfocused, and there was a hint of disbelief in them. Su Ming charged forward as well. Booming sounds surged into the sky and shook the ground in the area, causing it to tremble. After a moment, The sight of all the people fighting in the small battlefield froze for a moment appeared before their eyes. In that scene, Su Ming lifted his hand, and in his hand was a human head covered in blood. In the scene, Su Ming slowly took off the mask on the head. It was white, with a cross-shaped crack on it. The hunter's mask. I'm in Nanjing, and I'm talking about Renegade Immortal Publishing. The weather's so hot, so hot, so hot. I'm just a plump person, and I can't take it anymore. I'm in my room because of the air conditioner, and when I go out, I'm sweating because of the heat. I'm about to go crazy. Hot, hot, hot. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 365. The place where Su Ming and the masked shaman fought was just an insignificant part of the battlefield. Besides the people nearby who would pay attention to it, no one who was slightly further away would pay attention to it. Yet even so, the instant Su Ming removed the mask from the masked shaman's head, he attracted all the people's attention in that small area. Ziche saw it. Yin Bo saw it. The other members of Su Ming's team who were still alive also saw it, and the berserkers in the area also saw it. Similarly, when the hunter's head was lifted up by Su Ming, the shamans in the area also saw it. Hunt the shaman. Su Ming stood there and lifted the male shaman's head, then let out a low roar towards the berserkers nearby. The instant his voice traveled outwards, the berserkers in the area immediately roared with him. Excitement appeared on their faces, and when they looked at Su Ming, their gazes were filled with respect. There were not many berserkers in that small area. There were only about a few hundred of them, but as they roared, they repeated Su Ming's words. Hunt the shamans. The sounds of hundreds of people fighting might not be too eye-catching in the battlefield. After all, it was easy for people to confuse those sounds if they were echoing in all directions. However, at that moment, when these hundreds of people let out the same sound, it caused a slight ripple in the entire battlefield. The hundreds of people were located in the southern part of the battlefield between the shamans and berserkers. If anyone looked from the sky, the gigantic battlefield would look incredibly chaotic, but if they took a closer look, they would gradually be able to see some differences. The battlefield seemed to have been divided into 4 parts: north, south, east, west. These 4 parts seemed to be the 4 main war zones. They did not have clear boundaries between them, but as the crowd moved about, they could still vaguely see them. There were tens of thousands of people fighting against each other in the southern war zone, and death was a constant occurrence. At the end of the berserker crowd was a place that was relatively peaceful, and there stood 9 berserkers wearing black masks. They surrounded and protected a middle-aged man with a fair face and no facial hair. That man wore a long robe, and his hair was let down. His eyes were bright, and there seemed to be a profound look in them. He stood there and looked at the battlefield in the southern war zone silently. The 9 hunters from the berserker tribe around him stopped all the shamans from approaching, allowing the middle-aged man to calm down and sense the changes in the entire southern war zone. He had been standing there for a long time, as if he had been observing the berserkers and the shamans since the beginning of the war. It was as if he was rapidly learning and understanding the art of war. It has been a long time since the berserkers launched a war like this. The scale of the war that happens once every 10 years can't compare to this. It's just child's play. Even the war that happened 100 years ago and 200 years ago rarely happened, but now, in just a few short months, it has already appeared 3 times. The middle-aged man's expression was calm as he watched his clansmen kill each other. He looked at the ferocious shamans and sighed in his heart. There's no detailed deployment, no formation support, no commander's command. This is a chaotic battle. The only thing we have is the individual battles. Not only are these clansmen learning how to survive in this sort of battlefield, people like me are also learning. I'm using these battles to quickly master how to control this sort of battle. I believe that the shamans are doing the same. The middle-aged man cast a glance in the direction of the shamans, but the instant he looked over, hundreds of people roared at the same time at the edge of the southern war zone. Their roars traveled forth with a buzzing sound beyond the sounds of battle in the battlefield. Hunt the shamans! Hunt the shamans! Hunt the shamans! As those voices traveled forth, they gradually spread out, causing more berserkers to hear them and look towards the direction of the battle. A glint appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes as he looked over. "Go and see what's happening over there," he said languidly. One of the hunters from the berserker tribe beside him took a step forward with an aloof expression and charged into the crowd of people on the battlefield, straight towards the place where the hundreds of people's voices were coming from. Su Ming stood there. The voices of the berserkers around him turned into waves of sound that roared as he spoke. With a single move, Su Ming appeared beside Ziche and Yin Bo. Ziche's face was filled with respect and excitement. Yin Bo was the same by his side. When he looked at Su Ming, his gaze was filled with respect that came from the depths of his heart. "Sir Hunter, with you around, we can gather more of our people. When we gather together, our power will be greater," Yin Bo said excitedly. Once he obtained Su Ming's nod, Yin Bo took a few steps forward and stood behind Su Ming. Then he spoke loudly to the people fighting around him. "My fellow tribesmen, we will only be stronger when we have more people. What are you waiting for? You saw Sir Su Ming's actions. He killed the shaman hunters, so he is the berserker tribe's hunter. Let's gather together and clench our fingers into fists. Let's go and kill the shamans." As Yin Bo's voice echoed in the air, Su Ming took a step forward and turned into a violent gust of wind that charged towards the shamans. The slaughter did not stop, and blood rained down on the ground. Slowly, all the berserkers who did not have any enemies beside them in this small area quickly rushed towards Su Ming. After a moment, there were already nearly 200 berserkers following behind him. This group of people stood out like a sore thumb in the chaotic battlefield. Su Ming was not good at commanding, and this was also not the place he wanted to train himself in. However, people were different. Yin Bo was incredibly passionate about this, and even Ziche seemed to have some talent in it. Under their leadership, the team of nearly 200 berserkers moved like a long spear sweeping through the southern war zone with an indomitable will. Su Ming was right in front of them. His will and presence affected all the people following behind him, causing the team to turn into the fastest storm that could kill the shamans wherever they went. There is no one who is absolutely safe in this scattered battlefield. Everyone would instinctively choose to get closer to the group that had more people on their side. This sort of subconscious action caused Su Ming's small team to continuously have berserkers join them as they continued killing and moving around. This was also largely due to Yin Bo's occasional low growls. Those growls continuously told the others that Su Ming had won against the shaman hunters and had become the berserker tribe's hunter. Su Ming's actions in the front lines, his aloof expression, his determined gaze, and the white mask hanging on his waist were all enough to prove that everything Yin Bo had experienced was real. Yin Bo and Ziche had suggested for Su Ming to reveal that mask. To the berserkers, who were already exhausted from all the battles they had fought until now, this could perhaps serve as a rallying flag. Their numbers increased, and when dusk passed and the booming sounds and the green fog in the sky became even stronger, the number of berserkers behind Su Ming had already reached 400. Among these people were warriors from Sky Mist City, disciples from Western Sea Clan, fellow disciples from Freezing Sky Clan, and also the people from the various tribes in the land of South Morning who came to participate in the battle. They came from all sorts of places. Perhaps they did not know each other before today, but as they fought against each other, they formed a friendship on the battlefield through their flesh and blood. It was a friendship that made them shout together, bleed together, and kill together. To the entire battlefield, the Southern War Zone was just a part of it. To the Southern War Zone, Su Ming's hundreds of people were just a part of it, and they were even a very small part. However, the power that erupted forth from this small part was incredibly shocking. As they fought, they switched positions with each other according to Yin Bo and Ziche's commands. Because of that, everyone had time to rest, and everyone had time to be safe. With this method, the team's combat prowess reached its peak. Everyone was at ease with their backs, because their comrades were right behind them. Comrades. This was a term that surpassed that of their fellow tribesmen on the battlefield. Besides this, there was something else that caused these people's gazes to gradually become firm and their killing intent to gradually become sharp and fearless. That was an even more important existence to them, and that was the person who always stood at the forefront and never rested. The hunter, Su Ming. Su Ming was always there, right at the forefront. He was like the tip of the team as he fought against the berserkers. Every single time he took a step forward, it meant that the team behind him would also take a step forward. He was not skilled in commanding, and neither did he speak much. However, his existence was the soul of this 400-man team, because he gave the others a will that would press forward with an indomitable will, a will that would not fear death. That was even more important than Yin Bo's commands. It was the motivation that pushed these hundreds of people forward. As long as they saw Su Ming still standing at the forefront, then all the berserkers who were still alive after going through the battle would follow him without any hesitation. This was the battlefield. It was a place where there was no need for individual thoughts, no need for soldiers to scheme against each other, no need for them to think too much, and in fact, no need for them to think. In this place, the only thing they needed was this sort of will. If they had this sort of will, then in other people's eyes, they would be like a flame in the night that could illuminate their surroundings and attract people to follow them. As Su Ming's team continued fighting, the eyes of the middle-aged man who was still watching Su Ming in the relatively quiet spot in the southern war zone lit up brightly. Behind him was a hunter from the berserker tribe wearing a black mask, and he spoke in a low voice. His name is Su Ming. He just killed a hunter from the shaman tribe and became our hunter. There are about 400 of them. If he doesn't die, then the number of people in the team will increase. I understand now. The middle-aged man's eyes became brighter. Due to what happened to Su Ming, he had thought of a way for the berserker tribe to fight. Our buttocks are on fire. Monthly votes crisis. We can't do it when we're away, but when we're home, we'll do it. Monthly votes. Also, an advertisement for all readers. The Legend of Mana and Sword is a comic book that gathers many elements from fantasy, martial arts, urban, online games, cultivation, and many others. It is close to real life. There will be surprises every single day. Book ID 2377536 to be continued. If you like this book, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.